When a small-town mechanic helped an elderly woman everyone else had laughed at, he thought he was just doing the right thing, until she returned the next day in a limousine with a secret that would change his life forever. The engine sounded like it was taking its final breaths as the weathered station wagon limped across cracked asphalt, its wheels whispering over concrete that hadn't seen fresh paint in over a decade. The sign above Horizon Auto hung slightly crooked, its sun-faded letters peeling like skin left too long in the summer heat. Wind chimes made from old socket wrenches clinked together under the awning, swaying in a breeze that carried the scent of rust, rubber, and dreams that never quite made it beyond county lines. The station wagon, a battered '92 Ford Country Squire with peeling wood panel sides and two mismatched tires, made it halfway into the lot before stuttering to a wheezing halt, its front end dipping forward as if crossing a finish line it never intended to survive. A few heads turned from where they leaned against a Camaro with its hood propped open. Laughter rippled out. Not cruel exactly, but sharp, pointed, like the kind that comes easy in towns where resignation is as common as rust. "Looks like death forgot one," Derek mumbled around a vape pen, nodding toward the car. His buddy Pete elbowed him with a grin. "Bet there's a mummy in the driver's seat." Inside the station wagon, a frail silhouette moved behind the wheel. The windows were fogged from the inside, like the old heater was still trying to exhale against the autumn chill. And the shape of someone too small for the driver's seat shifted slowly, uncertainly. Mason Carter didn't hear the laughter at first. He was underneath a Honda Civic that smelled like melted belts and bad decisions, his arms shoulder deep in a suspension mount that had seized tighter than a miser's wallet. The radio in the corner buzzed static and oldies, a tune about broken hearts and fast cars playing low. Behind the roar of the space heater perched near the open garage bay, he wore the same navy blue coveralls he'd had since trade school, the name patch M. Carter, faded but intact. Sweat trickled down the side of his face despite the October air. His hands were wrapped in black grease and knuckle scabs, the kind that never quite healed before the next job bled them raw again. "Mason," a voice barked from across the garage over the clang of a falling wrench and the hiss of compressed air. He slid out from under the Civic on a creaking creeper board, blinking into the dirty light above. Frank stood at the workbench, 50-something, with a gut that hung over his belt like a threat, arms crossed over his grease-streaked flannel. He didn't bother looking up from his clipboard. "Your 3 o'clock didn't show," Frank said. "Means you got 10 minutes to clean up and pretend we don't run this place out of duct tape and dumb luck." Mason wiped his face with a towel that probably used to be white and tossed it over his shoulder. "She was a no-show yesterday too," he said. "Transmission rebuild. Probably couldn't afford it." Frank snorted. "Story of the year." Mason glanced out the garage door just as the laughter picked up again. That's when he saw the station wagon parked like it had rolled there by accident, idling unevenly as smoke slipped from the tailpipe in lazy ghost fingers. The driver's door opened with a groan loud enough to make people flinch, and a woman stepped out. She was maybe in her late 70s, small and bent slightly at the waist, her frame lost inside a thick wool coat 2 sizes too big. Her hair was thin and white, gathered in a bun that had come partially undone. She held a tattered leather handbag close to her chest, like it might break if she let it breathe too long. Her shoes were the kind you wore when your ankles hurt more than your pride, and every step she took looked like it cost her something. Mason watched her from the shadow of the garage, wiping his hands slowly on his rag, something in his chest hitching just a little. He didn't move at first, not until he saw her glance at the guys by the Camaro, heard them snicker again as Pete mock staggered forward, arms trembling in pantomime. "Need help, Grandma?" Derek called, "or just looking to die on a discount?" Mason was already moving, quiet steps, fast and measured. By the time the woman turned to respond, though she didn't, just tightened her grip on the bag and blinked slowly behind her glasses, Mason had passed through the garage door, tugging off his gloves and brushing the grit from his palms. "Y'all don't have anything better to do than harass someone who could outwalk your whole work ethic?" he said, not loud but firm, like a jack under a rusted frame. The guys froze for half a second, then smirked. "Just joking," Derek muttered. Mason ignored them. He turned to the woman and offered a soft smile, the kind he didn't use often, the kind he kept stored for moments that felt heavier than they looked. Ma'am, he said, you need some help? She blinked again, eyes a pale green that looked like they used to be sharper once. I think my car is dying, she said. Her voice was surprisingly clear, though touched with something brittle, like frost on glass. She got me this far, but I don't think she'll take me home. Mason glanced at the wagon again. The front tire was feathered to the cords, and the engine sounded like it was chewing on itself. He nodded slowly. Let me take a look, he said, already walking toward it. The Reynolds Enterprises boardroom occupied the entire northwest corner of the 37th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the downtown skyline. Morning light streamed through the glass, illuminating the 20-foot mahogany table where 12 people sat in Italian leather chairs, each with a glass of water and a leather portfolio embossed with the Reynolds R in gold leaf. At the head of the table, Catherine Reynolds sat perfectly straight, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, not a strand out of place. At 68, she carried herself with the poise of someone who had spent decades ensuring that others took her seriously. Her charcoal suit was impeccably tailored. Her only jewelry, a pair of pearl earrings and a simple gold wedding band she had never removed, even 15 years after her husband's death. The Westwood redevelopment project timeline is unacceptable, she said, her voice carrying across the room without her having to raise it. 6 months for permits is bureaucratic nonsense. I want it done in 3. Victoria Wells, the company's 45-year-old COO, tapped her tablet. The city council is dragging their feet, Catherine. They're concerned about displacement. Then we address those concerns concretely, not with vague promises, Catherine replied. Our foundation can establish a relocation assistance program for affected businesses with priority placement in the new development. Marcus Reynolds, Catherine's 39-year-old son and the company's chief investment officer, cleared his throat. Mother, that's an additional $8 million in unplanned expenses. Catherine's gaze flicked to her son. It's called investment in goodwill, Marcus, something your quarterly reports don't measure. She turned back to the table. The Reynolds name has meant something in this city for 3 generations. We don't just build buildings, we build communities. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Very inspiring, Catherine, but the shareholders, Catherine interrupted, receive consistent 7% returns in an unstable market because we think long-term. That's non-negotiable. The room fell silent. Catherine studied the faces around her, ambitious executives who saw properties as numbers on spreadsheets rather than homes and businesses where real people live their lives. Only Walter Green, seated at the far end of the table, gave her a knowing nod. At 85, Walter had been her mentor when she first took over the company after her husband's death. Now semi-retired, he attended meetings infrequently, but his support still mattered to her. If there's nothing else, Catherine said, gathering her papers, we'll reconvene next week to review the revised proposal. As the others filed out, Victoria lingered. Catherine, a moment? When the room had emptied, Victoria approached with the casual confidence of someone who had already measured the drapes in the corner office. I've been reviewing our 5-year succession plan. Catherine raised an eyebrow. Have you now? The board is concerned about stability. You've mentioned retiring for 3 years, yet I'm still here, Catherine finished for her, because there's still work to be done. Victoria leaned against the table. Marcus is ready to step up. And with my operational experience, my son, Catherine said carefully, has excellent financial instincts, but lacks vision. And you, Victoria, are efficient, but have yet to demonstrate that you understand what this company truly stands for. Victoria's smile tightened. With all due respect, Catherine, this company stands for profitable urban development. You've built an empire, not a charity. Catherine stood, gathering her belongings. That's precisely why neither of you is ready. She paused, then added, when you figure out what you're missing, perhaps we can revisit this conversation. As Victoria left, Catherine remained by the window, looking out at the city she had helped shape. From this height, the buildings looked like monuments, the streets like arteries. But she knew that down there, in those streets, was where real life happened, where people struggled, dreamed, and sometimes needed someone to notice they existed. She opened her purse and removed a small, worn photograph. It showed a younger Catherine standing beside a weathered station wagon, and next to her, a man in greasy coveralls with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Michael Carter. She ran her thumb over the image, then carefully tucked it away. Walter appeared in the doorway. Still carrying that old photo, I see. Catherine smiled. Some debts can never be repaid, Walter. You've repaid it 1,000 times over with your foundation work. She shook her head. It's not the same. He didn't just fix my car that day. He reminded me what humanity looks like when it isn't calculating the return on investment. Walter studied her. You're planning something. Perhaps it's time for a different kind of investment, she said, looking back at the city below. One that can't be measured in quarterly reports. The alarm clock shrieked at 5:30 a.m., and Mason's hand shot out from under the covers to silence it before it could wake Lily. The apartment was cold. The heater was acting up again, but he couldn't justify calling the landlord when he should be able to fix it himself. Later, he promised himself, after work. He padded quietly to the kitchen in worn flannel pajama pants and a faded Horizon Auto t-shirt, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles. The kitchen was small but tidy, with crayon drawings magnetized to the refrigerator and a row of plants on the windowsill. Lily's science project from last month, still thriving against the odds. Mason started the coffee maker, its familiar gurgle the soundtrack to his morning routine. While it brewed, he packed Lily's lunch, peanut butter and honey sandwich, crusts cut off, apple slices, carrot sticks she probably wouldn't eat, and a small note with a drawing of a robot he'd sketched last night. Have a gear-riot day, love, Dad? A floorboard creaked, and he turned to see his 10-year-old daughter standing in the doorway, already dressed in jeans and a purple sweater, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Hey, early bird, he said. You're up before the coffee's ready? Lily pushed her glasses up her nose. Science test today. Wanted to review my notes. Mason smiled, handing her a glass of orange juice. You've been studying all week. You'll ace it. She sipped her juice, eyeing him over the rim of the glass. Your hand's bleeding again. Mason looked down at his knuckles, where a cut from yesterday had reopened. Just a scratch, occupational hazard. You should wear the gloves I got you for Father's Day. I do wear them, Lil. Some jobs need bare hands to feel what's wrong. She nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense to her. Like a doctor. Exactly like a doctor. He placed her lunch in her backpack. Except my patients don't complain nearly as much. Lily grinned, revealing the gap where her front tooth had been last week. Mrs. Garcia's car complains a lot. That's because Mrs. Garcia's car is older than both of us combined. They ate breakfast together, toast and eggs for him, cereal for her, while Lily quizzed herself on the water cycle. Mason listened, asking questions at the right moments, marveling at how sharp she was. She had her mother's intelligence, her curiosity about how things worked. The thought of Sarah brought the familiar ache, softer now after 3 years but still present. He glanced at the photo on the refrigerator, the 3 of them at the beach, Lily just 7 years old. Sarah's smile radiant despite the cancer that had already begun its silent work inside her. Dad? Earth to Dad? Mason blinked. Sorry, spaceship. What was that? I asked if you could come to Career Day next month. Mrs. Wilson asked for parent volunteers. Of course I can, he said immediately. What should I bring? Spark plugs? Pistons? Oil filters? Lily rolled her eyes. Maybe just pictures. Remember last year when Tommy's dad brought his dental tools and Billy threw up? Mason chuckled. Fair point. Pictures it is. After breakfast, Mason drove Lily to school in his old Tacoma pickup. Mismatched doors, dented fender, but an engine that purred like a contented cat because he treated it with respect. They pulled up in front of Oak Ridge Elementary just as the first bell rang. Math club after school? He asked. Lily nodded, gathering her things. Ray's picking me up, right? Right as rain. He'll bring you to the garage after. She leaned across the seat and kissed his cheek. Fix something cool today. I'll do my best, he promised, watching her run up the steps, her dark ponytail bouncing against her backpack. Horizon Auto was already buzzing when Mason arrived. Frank was in the office arguing with a parts supplier on the phone. Derek and Pete were huddled around the coffee maker, looking hungover and surly. Ray Henderson was beneath a lifted Jeep, only his legs visible, rhythmic clangs suggesting he was fighting with a stubborn exhaust system. Mason hung his jacket on the hook that had been his since he started at the garage 12 years ago, right after trade school. He'd been just a kid then, hungry to prove himself, to show that Michael Carter's son had inherited more than just his name. Ray rolled out from under the Jeep, wiping his hands on a rag. At 40, Ray had the solid build of a former high school linebacker and the easy smile of someone comfortable in his own skin. Unlike Frank, who owned the garage but treated it like a burden, Ray genuinely loved cars and the people who drove them. "Morning, sunshine," Ray said. "You're just in time for the mystery fluid challenge. $10 says it's transmission fluid. Frank says power steering." Mason peered under the Jeep. "Neither, that's brake fluid. See the color?" Ray squinted. "Damn, you're right. No wonder the pedal's spongy." He stood stretching his back. "How's our girl today?" "Quizzed herself on evaporation all through breakfast. I think she knows more about clouds than the Weather Channel." "Smart as a whip, that one." Ray glanced toward the office, then lowered his voice. "Frank's in a mood. Supplier jacked prices again, and the Hernandez account is past due." Mason nodded. The garage had been struggling for months, caught between rising costs and customers who couldn't afford to pay. Chain operations like Precision Auto were taking the easy, profitable jobs, leaving the complicated, time-consuming work to shops like Horizon. "We'll figure it out," Mason said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "We always do." Ray clapped him on the shoulder. "That we do. Oh, nearly forgot. That station wagon you worked on yesterday," Lady called. "Left this weird message about saying thank you." Mason frowned. "I gave her my number in case the car acted up again." "Well, she didn't sound upset. Just formal, I guess, like she was leaving a message with a secretary or something." Before Mason could respond, Frank emerged from the office, face flushed with frustration. "Carter! Henderson! This ain't a social club. We've got 6 jobs waiting and bills that won't pay themselves." They got to work, falling into the familiar rhythm of the garage. Mason moved from vehicle to vehicle with quiet efficiency. A starter motor replacement on a delivery van, brake pads on a schoolteacher's Subaru, diagnostics on a mysterious engine knock that turned out to be a loose heat shield. His hands seemed to know what tools to reach for before his brain had fully processed the problem, a kind of mechanical intuition he'd had since childhood. Around noon, the radio switched from classic rock to news. Mason was only half listening from underneath a Ford F-150 when a familiar name caught his attention. Reynolds Enterprises announced today that CEO Catherine Reynolds will be expanding the company's community investment program, focusing on small business revitalization in neighborhoods affected by urban development. Mason slid out from under the truck, frowning. Reynolds Enterprises was the development company buying up properties all over Oak Ridge, transforming old storefronts into high-end boutiques and affordable apartments into luxury condos. The garage had received 3 purchase offers in the past year, each one more aggressive than the last. "Speak of the devil," Ray muttered, nodding toward the window. Outside, a sleek black Audi SUV was pulling into the lot, parking precisely between the faded lines. A man in an expensive suit emerged, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the expression of someone who'd just smelled something unpleasant. "That's James Phillips," Frank said, appearing beside them, Precision Auto's owner. "What's he doing here?" Mason asked. "Coming to gloat?" Frank shrugged. "Said he wanted to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Whatever the hell that means." They watched as Phillips approached, his Italian leather shoes carefully avoiding puddles of oil and antifreeze. He was in his early 50s, with the tanned, lean look of someone who spent more time at the country club than in a garage. "Mr. Weathers," Phillips said, extending a manicured hand to Frank. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Frank grunted, wiping his hands before shaking. "Didn't agree to anything. You said you were coming by." Phillips smiled without warmth. "Yes, well, I appreciate the opportunity regardless." His gaze swept over the garage, lingering on the peeling paint and outdated equipment. "I'll be direct. Precision Auto is expanding its presence in Oak Ridge, and this location would be ideal for our express service center." "This location ain't for sale," Frank said flatly. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Weathers," Phillips replied, opening his portfolio. "Mine happens to be 15% above market value. Given the challenges small operations like yours are facing, I think you'll find it more than fair. Mason felt his jaw tighten. Phillips talked about the garage like it was a failing experiment rather than people's livelihoods. Frank took the offered document, glancing over it. I'll think about it. Don't think too long, Phillips advised. Reynolds Enterprises is buying up this entire block for redevelopment. Once that happens, property values will shift dramatically, and not in your favor. Mason stepped forward. So this is what, a rescue offer? You're doing us a favor? Phillips turned, noticing Mason for the first time. And you are? Mason Carter, senior mechanic. Ah, yes. Well, Mr. Carter, I'm offering a business solution. The automotive service industry is changing. Operations like this, he gestured around the garage, are becoming obsolete. I'm offering your employer a dignified exit. What about the employees? Ray asked. You planning to keep the current staff? Phillips hesitated. We'd evaluate each case individually, of course. Those whose skills align with our service model would be considered. Meaning none of us, Mason translated. Phillips smiled thinly. Change is inevitable, Mr. Carter. The question is whether you adapt or get left behind. As he turned to leave, he paused, looking back at Mason. You know, Precision is always looking for skilled technicians. Someone with your experience might do well in a more structured environment. Think about it. They watched him drive away, the Audi's engine purring expensively. You're not seriously considering it, are you? Mason asked Frank once Phillips was gone. Frank refolded the offer, his expression unreadable. 15% above market is nothing to sneeze at, Mason. And he's not wrong about Reynolds Enterprises. They're buying everything that isn't nailed down. So we just give up? Let chains like Precision take over while we walk away? Frank sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 57 years. Sometimes walking away is the smart play, son. I've got retirement to think about, and this place isn't exactly a gold mine. Before Mason could respond, the phone rang. Frank disappeared into the office to answer it, leaving Mason and Ray standing in uncomfortable silence. He wouldn't really sell, would he? Mason finally asked. Ray shrugged. Hard to blame him if he did. This place has been running on fumes for years. The reality of it hit Mason like a physical blow. Horizon wasn't just a job. It was where he'd built his life after Sarah died, where he'd found stability for himself and Lily. The thought of starting over, of becoming just another numbered employee at a place like Precision, made something in his chest constrict. What would you do, he asked Ray, if this place closed? Ray considered the question. I've got a buddy in Seattle, runs a restoration shop. Been trying to get me to move up there for years. He glanced at Mason. What about you? Mason didn't answer. He didn't have a backup plan, never needed one. His life was here, Lily's school, their apartment, the community they'd built. Starting over wasn't just inconvenient, it was impossible. Frank emerged from the office looking puzzled. Mason, that was for you. Some woman named Catherine says she needs to speak with you about her station wagon. Wants to know if you can meet her at Palmer Park at 5. Palmer Park? Ray raised an eyebrow. Fancy neighborhood for a station wagon owner. Mason frowned. Did she say what was wrong with the car? Frank shook his head. Just that it was important. Sounded old, proper, you know, like she was asking you to tea with the Queen. Probably can't afford the repair bill, Derek called from across the garage. Wants to beg for a payment plan. Mason ignored him. I'll finish the Rodriguez brake job, then head over. As he returned to work, Mason couldn't shake a strange feeling of unease. Something about the woman with the station wagon had stuck with him, not just her age or her obvious financial constraints, but the dignity with which she carried herself, the clear gaze that seemed to look through him rather than at him. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of oil changes and timing belt adjustments. At 4:45, Mason cleaned up, changing his oil-stained work shirt for a slightly less stained navy Henley he kept in his locker. Want me to come with? Ray offered as Mason prepared to leave. Palmer Park isn't exactly mechanic territory. Mason smiled. I'll be fine, probably just needs advice on whether the repair is worth it for an old car like that. Your funeral, Ray joked. Don't forget, I'm picking up Lily at 5:30. Thanks, man. I owe you one. You owe me about 50, but who's counting? Palmer Park sat on the edge of Oak Ridge's affluent north side with manicured lawns, a small lake, and benches that didn't have gum stuck underneath them. Mason felt out of place as he parked his battered pickup beside gleaming SUVs and luxury sedans. His hands, though scrubbed clean, still carried traces of grease in the creases of his knuckles, and beneath his fingernails, the permanent badge of his profession. He spotted her immediately, the elderly woman from yesterday, sitting primly on a bench overlooking the lake. She wore the same oversized wool coat, her white hair still in that slightly disheveled bun. The station wagon was nowhere in sight. Mason approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Ma'am, I'm Mason Carter from Horizon Auto. You called about your car?" She turned, those pale green eyes finding his with surprising sharpness. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming." Her voice was steadier than yesterday, more composed. "Please sit." He lowered himself onto the bench beside her, feeling strangely formal. "Is there a problem with the repairs? The belt might take a while to settle in, but it should hold." She smiled, the expression transforming her face in a way that made Mason suddenly uncertain of her age. "The car is running beautifully. Thank you. That's not why I asked you here." Mason waited, confused. The woman reached into her large handbag and withdrew an envelope, cream-colored and expensive-looking. "My name is Catherine Reynolds," she said, watching his face carefully. "Does that name mean anything to you?" Mason stared. Catherine Reynolds? The Catherine Reynolds? The show of Reynolds Enterprises? The company buying up half the town, including the block where Horizon Auto stood? "You're not who I was expecting," he managed finally. She laughed softly. "No, I imagine not. Yesterday I wasn't being entirely truthful about my circumstances." "You were testing me," Mason realized, the pieces falling into place. The old clothes, the act, the station wagon. It was all a test. "Not a test exactly," she corrected. "More of a search." "For what?" "Integrity, something increasingly rare these days." She handed him the envelope. "Inside is a proposition I'd like you to consider. It involves your future, the garage, and a project I've been contemplating for some time." Mason didn't open it. "Why me? Why the charade?" Catherine gazed out at the lake where a pair of ducks skimmed across the surface. "I visited 6 garages before yours. At one, they laughed in my face. At another, they tried to sell me parts I didn't need. At a third, they simply turned me away when they realized I wasn't carrying a platinum credit card." She turned back to him. "Only you treated me like a human being deserving of dignity, regardless of what you thought I could afford." Mason shifted uncomfortably. "I just did my job." "No," she said firmly. "You did more than your job. You stood up for a stranger against ridicule. You worked on a car that probably wasn't worth the time, and you refused payment when you clearly needed it." She paused. "Your father would have been proud." Mason froze. "You knew my father?" Catherine's expression softened. "Michael Carter changed my life 30 years ago, much the same way you tried to help me yesterday. When I saw your name tag, I thought it might be coincidence. But then I saw how you worked, how you spoke to me, and I knew." Mason's mind reeled. His father had never mentioned knowing anyone like Catherine Reynolds. Michael Carter had been a simple mechanic, working out of a small garage not unlike Horizon, fixing cars for people who couldn't afford dealership prices. "I don't understand," he said finally. Catherine reached into her bag again and withdrew a photograph. Faded, creased, clearly cherished. She handed it to Mason. The image showed a much younger Catherine standing beside the same station wagon he'd worked on yesterday, though it had been newer then. Beside her stood a man in his 30s, wearing overalls with the name Carter stitched above the pocket. He had Mason's jawline, his build, and most strikingly, the same way of standing, weight on one foot, head slightly tilted, as if listening for something others couldn't hear. "This was taken the day after your father fixed my car," Catherine explained. "It was the last thing my husband and I owned together before he died. When it broke down, I was in a dark place. Michael didn't just repair the vehicle. He reminded me that kindness still existed." Mason stared at the photograph, his throat tight. "He never told me about this." "He wouldn't have," she said gently. To him, it wasn't extraordinary. It was simply the right thing to do. She nodded toward the envelope in his hands. Which is why I believe you're the perfect person for what I'm proposing. Mason finally opened the envelope, pulling out several pages of heavy paper filled with legal language, financial figures, and architectural renderings. At the top, in bold letters, the Carter Foundation for Community Automotive Service. "What is this?" he asked, scanning the document. "A network of community garages," Catherine explained, "providing affordable repairs, job training, and mentorship programs in neighborhoods that need them most, starting with Horizon Auto as the flagship location." Mason looked up sharply. Horizon is being sold to Precision Auto. Their owner was at the shop today. Catherine's smile turned knowing. James Phillips thinks he's purchasing that property because it's what I wanted him to believe. In reality, I've already bought the entire block through a subsidiary. The deed will transfer to the foundation, with you as executive director. Me? Mason shook his head. I'm a mechanic, not a businessman. I don't know the first thing about running a foundation. You know more than you realize, Catherine countered. You understand what people need, what integrity looks like in practice. The business aspects can be taught. She leaned forward slightly. Mason, what Phillips and others like him don't understand is that places like Horizon aren't just businesses. They're community pillars. When they disappear, something essential is lost. Mason's mind raced. It was too much to process. This elegant, powerful woman who somehow knew his father, offering him what sounded like a lifeline not just for himself, but for everything he cared about. "Why now?" he asked. "After all these years?" Catherine sighed, a hint of regret crossing her features. "I've spent decades building Reynolds Enterprises, focusing on progress and growth. But lately I've been reminded of what truly matters. I'm not getting any younger, Mason. I want to ensure that Michael's legacy, his belief in helping others without calculating the return, lives on." Before Mason could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Ray. "Running late, school called. Lily in trouble?" Mason stood quickly. "I'm sorry, I have to go. My daughter—" Catherine nodded, understanding immediately. "Of course, take the proposal with you. Read it when you have time." She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, pressing it into his palm. "And this belongs with you now." Mason looked down. It was a keychain, weathered leather in the shape of a gear, with the letter M pressed into the center. Something about it felt familiar, though he was certain he had never seen it before. "My husband gave this to your father after he fixed our car," Catherine explained. "Michael returned it to me years later, saying it should go to the next person who makes someone feel seen. I think that person is you." Mason closed his fingers around the keychain, oddly moved by this small connection to his father. "I'll think about your offer," he promised. "That's all I ask," Catherine said. "And Mason, whatever you decide, I'm glad I found you." As Mason hurried back to his truck, the keychain clutched in his hand and the proposal tucked under his arm, he couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had just happened, that the story of his life had reached a chapter break, with everything before this moment suddenly cast in a different light. His father, the quiet man who had taught him about engines and integrity, had somehow touched the life of one of the most powerful women in the city. And now, through some twist of fate or cosmic coincidence, their paths had crossed again, offering Mason a glimpse of a future he'd never imagined possible. The keychain weighed in his pocket like a talisman as he drove toward Lily's school, his mind full of questions without answers, possibilities without guarantees, and the strange sensation that his father, gone for more than a decade, was somehow riding beside him, nodding in quiet approval. Mason's truck skidded into the elementary school parking lot, tires crunching over scattered autumn leaves. The clock on his dashboard read 5:47 p.m., the building mostly empty now, windows dark except for the administrative offices. His heart hammered against his ribs as he jogged toward the entrance. Catherine Reynolds' proposal still tucked under his arm, the leather keychain heavy in his pocket. The school's main hallway smelled of floor cleaner and forgotten lunches. Mason followed the sound of voices to the principal's office, where he found Lily sitting on a bench outside, legs swinging, her backpack clutched in her lap. Beside her sat Ray, looking equal parts concerned and uncomfortable in the child-sized chair. Lily looked up, her face brightening. Dad! Mason knelt in front of her, scanning for any signs of injury or distress. Hey, Lil, you okay? What happened? Before she could answer, the office door opened and Principal Garvey emerged, a tall woman with prematurely silver hair and reading glasses that magnified her already serious eyes. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. She gestured to her office. If we could speak privately? Mason squeezed Lily's hand. Be right back, kiddo. Inside the office, Principal Garvey settled behind her desk, folding her hands atop a manila folder. Mr. Carter, I want to be clear that Lily isn't in trouble exactly. Mason exhaled. That's a relief. However, there was an incident today that concerns me. She opened the folder, revealing a sheet of notebook paper covered in meticulous pencil drawings. During free period, Lily was found in the computer lab accessing information about Reynolds Enterprises. Mason frowned. Reynolds Enterprises? Yes. When Ms. Wilson asked what she was doing, Lily said she was researching the lady who knew Grandpa Michael. She then created this. Principal Garvey slid the drawing across the desk. Mason stared at the page. It was a surprisingly detailed sketch of what appeared to be a garage, not unlike Horizon, but reimagined with new equipment, solar panels on the roof, and a sign that read Carter Foundation Garage. In the corner, Lily had drawn two figures, a tall man in coveralls and a small girl holding what looked like a wrench. I don't understand, Mason said. Lily's never mentioned Reynolds Enterprises before. Principal Garvey's expression softened slightly. Mr. Carter, is there something going on at home that Lily might be processing through her artwork? Changes in your employment, perhaps? Mason thought of the proposal in his truck, of Catherine Reynolds and her impossible offer. No, he said, then caught himself. I mean, not yet. There's been some talk about the garage changing ownership, but nothing definite. I see. Principal Garvey didn't look entirely convinced. Well, Lily mentioned something about a billionaire grandma who was going to help you fix everyone's cars. The other children became quite excited, and when Ms. Wilson tried to redirect the conversation, Lily became insistent. Mason closed his eyes briefly. Of course. Lily must have overheard him talking to Ray about the woman with the station wagon. I'll talk to her, he promised. She has an active imagination, and I think she may have misunderstood something she overheard. Principal Garvey nodded. Lily is a bright child, Mr. Carter. Exceptionally bright. But she's still processing grief, and sometimes children create fantasies to help them cope with uncertainty. Mason felt a familiar twist of guilt. Since Sarah's death, he'd done everything possible to provide stability for Lily, but there were moments, like now, when he wondered if it was enough. Thank you for understanding, he said, standing to leave. It won't happen again. Principal Garvey handed him Lily's drawing. She's very talented. Perhaps some art classes might be a good outlet. Mason nodded, already calculating whether he could afford them. I'll look into it. Outside, Lily was explaining the inner workings of a carburetor to a bemused Ray. She jumped up when Mason emerged, her expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. Am I in big trouble? She asked quietly. No, sweetheart, but we need to talk about what happened today. Mason looked at Ray. Thanks for coming to get her. I owe you. Ray waved him off. 51 now, but who's counting? He ruffled Lily's hair. See you tomorrow, Professor Carburetor. As they walked to the truck, Lily glanced up at Mason. Are you mad? Mason helped her into the passenger seat, making sure her seatbelt was secure before answering. I'm not mad, Lil. I'm confused. Where did you hear about Reynolds Enterprises and a billionaire grandma? Lily fidgeted with her backpack straps. I heard you and Ray talking this morning about a lady with an old car, and then I heard Frank say something about Reynolds buying everything. So I looked it up at school. She looked up, eyes wide behind her glasses. Dad, they have buildings everywhere, and the lady who runs it is super old, like a grandma. Is she going to help us fix the garage? Mason started the truck, buying himself time to think. How much should he tell her? Lily was perceptive, too perceptive sometimes, and he'd always been honest with her, even when it was difficult. Her name is Catherine Reynolds, he said finally. And yes, she came to the garage yesterday with an old car. She knew Grandpa Michael a long time ago. Lily's eyes widened. Really? What was he like when he was young? Did he fix her fancy cars? I don't think her cars were fancy back then, Mason said, smiling despite himself. And I don't know much more than that. She only told me today. Is she really going to help us? Because Tommy's dad says our garage is going to close, and then we'll have to move, and I don't want to move, Dad. The words tumbled out in a rush, revealing the anxiety she'd been hiding. Mason reached over, squeezing her hand. Nobody's moving, Lil, I promise. And I don't know exactly what Mrs. Reynolds wants to do yet. She gave me some papers to read, but I haven't had a chance to look at them carefully. Can I see them? Let's get home first, okay? Then we'll talk about it. The drive home was quiet, Lily lost in thought, Mason's mind racing between Catherine's proposal, Lily's concerns, and the looming uncertainty about Horizon's future. The leather keychain seemed to burn in his pocket, a tangible link to a past he hadn't known existed and a future he couldn't yet imagine. Their apartment building looked particularly shabby in the fading light. Peeling paint, missing shingles, a general air of resignation. It wasn't much, but it was home. Mason had made it as comfortable as possible for Lily, with her science projects lining the windowsills and her artwork covering the refrigerator. Now he wondered if he'd been fooling himself, thinking this was enough. Inside, Mason heated leftover spaghetti while Lily set the table, their evening routine a well-choreographed dance in the small kitchen. He placed Catherine's proposal on the counter, where it seemed to draw both their gazes throughout dinner. So, Lily said eventually, twirling pasta around her fork, are you going to read it? Mason smiled. Subtle, kid. I'm just saying it might be important. It might be, he agreed, but it's also complicated, adult stuff. Lily's expression turned serious. Mom always said I was an old soul. The mention of Sarah caught Mason off guard, as it always did. She did say that, didn't she? So maybe I can help with the adult stuff? Mason studied his daughter, her earnest expression, the determination in her eyes so like her mother's. He'd spent 3 years trying to protect her from adult worries, but maybe that wasn't what she needed. Okay, he said, after dinner we'll look at it together. But then homework in bed. Deal? Deal. Later they sat on the couch, the proposal spread across the coffee table. Mason explained what he understood of Catherine's plan, the foundation, the community garages, his potential role as director. Lily listened intently, asking surprisingly insightful questions about funding, locations, and whether Derek and Pete would still have jobs. It sounds amazing, she said finally, like what Grandpa Michael would have wanted. Maybe, Mason said cautiously, but it's also a huge change. I'd be doing a completely different job. We'd have to adjust to a lot of new things. Lily considered this. But we'd be helping people, right? People who can't afford to fix their cars? That's the idea. Then it's worth it. She said it with such certainty, such conviction, that Mason felt a swell of pride mingled with trepidation. When had his little girl become so wise? I still need to think about it, he said. Talk to Ray, figure out if it's even possible. Lily nodded, yawning despite her best efforts to hide it. Don't wait too long, Dad. Mrs. Reynolds is really old. She might not have much time left. Mason laughed, ruffling her hair. All right, Miss Sensitivity. Homework, then bed. As Lily disappeared into her room, Mason gathered the proposal pages, his gaze falling on the keychain Catherine had given him. The leather was worn smooth with age, the M still clearly visible in the center of the gear. Had his father carried this? Had it meant something to him? He pulled out his phone, hesitating only briefly before dialing Ray's number. The prodigal mechanic lives, Ray wished he answered. How's our junior engineer? Working on homework. Listen, Ray, I need to talk to you about something. Can you meet me at Decker's in 20 minutes? The plot thickens. Should I bring a disguise and fake passport? Just yourself, and maybe an open mind. After arranging for Mrs. Patel next door to listen for Lily, Mason drove to Decker's Bar and Grill, a no-frills establishment that had been serving the same mediocre beer and exceptional burgers since before he was born. The neon sign buzzed and flickered in the growing darkness, casting a red glow over the handful of pickup trucks in the gravel lot. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of fried food and old wood. A few regulars hunched over the bar, while the corner jukebox played Johnny Cash just loud enough to provide cover for private conversations. Ray was already in their usual booth, 2 beers waiting on the scarred wooden table. Okay, Ray said as Mason slid in across from him. What's with the cloak and dagger routine? You look like you've seen a ghost. Mason took a long pull from his beer before answering. You remember that old woman with the station wagon yesterday? The one who called the shop today? What about her? She's Catherine Reynolds. Ray stared. Catherine Reynolds as in Reynolds Enterprises, the development company buying half the town? Mason nodded. She was in disguise yesterday testing mechanics around town. Apparently I passed some kind of test by helping her. A test for what? Mason slid the proposal across the table. For this. Ray flipped through the documents, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief. A foundation? With you as director? Mason, this is crazy, impossible, a cruel joke? I was going to say life-changing, but sure, let's go with crazy. Ray leaned back, studying Mason's face. You're serious about this? I don't know what I am. Mason ran a hand through his hair. There's more. She knew my dad. 30 years ago, he helped her with that same station wagon right after her husband died. She kept a photo of him all these years. Ray whistled low. That's some 6 degrees of separation stuff right there. It gets weirder. Mason pulled out the keychain, placing it on the table between them. This belonged to my dad. Catherine's husband gave it to him, and he gave it back to her years later. Now she's giving it to me. Ray picked up the keychain, turning it over in his fingers. The M for Michael, and now Mason. Yeah. So what are you going to do? Mason sighed. I don't know. Part of me thinks it's too good to be true. Why would someone like Catherine Reynolds care about a small garage in a forgotten corner of town? Why me? Maybe because you're good at what you do, but Ray suggested, Mom, maybe because she sees something in you that reminds her of your dad. Or maybe there's something else going on that I don't understand yet. Mason took another drink. What would you do? Ray considered the question, his usual quick humor replaced by thoughtful silence. Honestly, I'd be scared as hell, but I'd also be excited. This kind of opportunity doesn't come along every day, especially not for guys like us. Guys like us? You know what I mean. Blue-collar, paycheck-to-paycheck types. We fix things, Mason. We're good at it, but we don't usually get to build something new. Mason nodded slowly. Lily thinks I should do it. Says it's what Dad would have wanted. Smart kid. Yeah, she is. Mason smiled faintly. She also thinks Catherine is her new billionaire grandma who's going to save the garage. Ray laughed. Well, from the looks of this proposal, she's not entirely wrong. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of James Phillips, who strode into the bar with the confidence of someone who believed every room improved with his presence. He spotted them immediately, changing course to approach their booth. Mr. Carter, Mr. Henderson. Phillips nodded to each of them. What a coincidence. Is it? Mason asked. Or were you following me? Phillips smiled thinly. Paranoia doesn't suit you, Carter. I'm meeting a business associate. He glanced at the documents on the table. Discussing your futures, I see. Wise decision. Ray gathered the proposal pages, sliding them back into the envelope. Just enjoying a beer after work. You should try it sometime. Might help with that stick up your... Ray, Mason interrupted. Not now. Philip's smile didn't waver. I understand your loyalty to Horizon Auto. Truly I do, but sentiment is a luxury in business. Frank Weathers knows that, which is why he's seriously considering my offer. Frank hasn't agreed to anything, Mason said. Not yet, but he will. Phillips adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture so deliberately casual, it had to be practiced. The writing's on the wall, gentlemen. Precision Auto is the future. You can either be part of it or get left behind. With that, he moved to a table across the room where a woman in a tailored suit was waiting. Something about her seemed familiar to Mason, though he couldn't place where he might have seen her before. Who's that with him? He asked Ray. Ray squinted across the dim bar. Don't know her name, but I've seen her picture in the business section. Some executive type from Reynolds Enterprises, I think. Mason frowned. What would a Reynolds executive be doing meeting with Phillips? Maybe they're dating, Ray suggested. Rich people tend to stick together. Maybe, But Mason couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why would an executive from Catherine's company be meeting with the man trying to buy Horizon, especially if Catherine herself was planning to acquire the property for her foundation? Their drive home was quiet, Lily asleep against his shoulder, her backpack clutched in her lap. The city seemed to slip into darkness around them, streetlights flickering to life like hesitant stars. Mason couldn't help but feel that his life was balanced on a knife's edge. Everything he knew on one side, everything he could become on the other. The next morning arrived with a clarity that only sleep and decision can bring. Mason had spent half the night poring over Catherine's proposal, researching Reynolds Enterprises, and thinking about what his father would have done. By dawn, he knew what his answer would be. Horizon Auto was already buzzing when he arrived, though not with its usual activity. Frank was in the office with a man in a suit, not Phillips, but someone equally polished and out of place. Derek and Pete huddled by the coffee maker, their expressions a mixture of concern and resignation. Ray was nowhere to be seen. "What's going on?" Mason asked as he hung up his jacket. Derek jerked his head toward the office. "Lawyer man showed up at opening. Been in there with Frank ever since." "Phillips' lawyer?" Pete shrugged. "Dunno. Fancy suit, though. Bet he charges more per hour than we make in a week." Mason approached the office cautiously. Through the glass partition, he could see Frank looking overwhelmed, flipping through documents while the suit pointed to specific paragraphs. Frank glanced up, saw Mason, and motioned him in. "Mason, this is Mr. Abright," Frank said as Mason entered. "He represents Catherine Reynolds." "Mr." Abright was tall and thin, with silver-rimmed glasses and the precise movements of someone who measured life in billable increments. "Mr. Carter, a pleasure. Mrs. Reynolds spoke highly of you." Mason shook the offered hand. "What's this about?" "Mrs. Reynolds has authorized me to present a counteroffer for Horizon Auto," Abright explained, sliding a document across the desk. "She believes this property would be ideal for the first Carter Foundation community garage." Frank looked shell-shocked. "It's double what Phillips offered, Mason. Double." "Mrs. Reynolds is quite committed to this project," Abright said smoothly. "She's prepared to move quickly with minimal disruption to your current operations." Mason scanned the document. The terms were generous, not just the purchase price, but provisions for retaining current staff, upgrading equipment, and establishing training programs for disadvantaged youth. Everything Catherine had outlined in her proposal, now formalized in legal language. "Have you accepted?" he asked Frank. Frank spread his hands helplessly. "How could I not? This is more than I ever thought I'd get for this place. It's enough to retire on, maybe move somewhere warm." He paused. "The thing is, Mason, Mrs. Reynolds wants you to run it, says the deal's contingent on you accepting some director position." Before Mason could respond, the door opened and Ray burst in, looking flustered. "Sorry I'm late, car trouble, if you can believe it. What did I miss?" For the next hour, Abright explained the details of Catherine's offer. The foundation structure, Mason's role, the vision for expanding to other locations if the pilot proved successful. Ray asked pointed questions about finances and logistics, his practical nature cutting through the legal jargon to the heart of the matter. By the time Abright left, promising to return the next day for their decision, the garage had fallen into an unusual quiet. "So," Frank said finally, "what are you thinking, Mason?" Mason leaned against the workbench, the familiar weight of a wrench in his hand grounding him. "I'm thinking it sounds too good to be true, but also that it might be exactly what this place needs." "What we all need," Ray added. "Let's be honest, Frank. Horizon's been on life support for years. This could save not just the garage, but the whole neighborhood." Frank nodded slowly. "I know. That's why I'm inclined to accept." He looked at Mason. "But it all hinges on you, son. Are you ready to be more than just a mechanic?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Mason had never seen himself as anything but a mechanic. It was what he knew, what he was good at, what connected him to his father. The prospect of becoming a director, of building something larger than himself, was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. "I need to talk to Catherine," he said finally, "face to face, not through lawyers. There are things I need to understand before I say yes." Frank clapped him on the shoulder. "Fair enough. Take the day, sort it out. We'll manage here." "I'll call her office," Mason said, reaching for his phone. Ray shook his head. No need, she's already here. They turned to see a sleek black town car pulling into the lot, its polished surface reflecting the morning sun. Catherine Reynolds stepped out, looking nothing like the frail woman in the oversized coat. Today she wore a tailored pantsuit in deep burgundy, her silver hair elegantly styled, her posture straight and commanding. Beside her walked Walter Green, his wizened face creased in a smile. Well, Frank muttered, this just got interesting. The garage fell silent as Catherine entered, her presence transforming the grimy space into something momentarily grand. Even Derek and Pete straightened unconsciously, their usual slouches abandoned in the face of such palpable authority. Mr. Weathers, Catherine nodded to Frank, thank you for accommodating my attorney this morning. Her gaze shifted to Mason. Mr. Carter, I hope you've had time to consider my proposal. I have, Mason said, and I have questions. Catherine smiled, a genuine warmth replacing her professional demeanor. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Perhaps we could speak privately? They moved to the small break room at the back of the garage, a shabby space with a wobbly table, mismatched chairs, and a refrigerator that hummed like a diesel engine. Walter joined them, settling into a chair with the careful movements of advanced age. Mason, this is Walter Green, Catherine said, my oldest friend and advisor. He was there the day your father helped me. Walter extended a gnarled hand. Michael was a good man, fixed more than just cars, if you take my meaning. Mason shook the offered hand, feeling calluses that suggested Walter had known manual labor before boardrooms. It's an honor, sir. Walter, please. Sir makes me feel even older than I am, which is saying something. Catherine took a seat, gesturing for Mason to do the same. I sense hesitation in your response to my offer. I'd like to understand your concerns. Mason sat across from her, acutely aware of the grease under his fingernails, the patch on his coveralls, the gulf of experience and wealth that separated them. Why me, Otto? Why now? I appreciate the connection to my father, but this is a multi-million-dollar project you're proposing. There must be more qualified people to run it. Catherine exchanged a glance with Walter before answering. Qualifications come in many forms, Mason. Yes, you lack formal business education, but you possess something far rarer. A genuine understanding of the communities this foundation aims to serve. As for why now, Walter added, Catherine isn't getting any younger. None of us are. There comes a point when you start thinking about legacy. Catherine nodded. Reynolds Enterprises has built remarkable things over the years, but structures of glass and steel aren't what truly matter in the end. It's the lives you touch, the communities you strengthen. Like my father touched your life, Mason said. Exactly. Catherine leaned forward slightly. When I met Michael, I was at my lowest point. My husband had just died, leaving me with a company I barely understood and a heart that felt permanently broken. Your father's kindness, his refusal to see me as just another customer or problem to solve, reminded me of my own humanity at a time when I desperately needed it. She came back to the garage every month after that, Walter said, smiling at the memory, always finding some minor issue that needed fixing. Michael would drop whatever he was doing to help her. Mason frowned. He never mentioned knowing you. No, he wouldn't have, Catherine said. Michael wasn't one to boast about his connections. And our friendship, while meaningful, was confined to the garage. He declined every invitation to social events or company functions. That sounds like Dad, Mason admitted. He always said he didn't belong in fancy places. He belonged exactly where he chose to be, Catherine corrected gently, which is a wisdom many never acquire. Mason considered this. The woman you were meeting with Phillips last night, who is she? Catherine's expression sharpened. Woman? What woman? At Decker's bar, Phillips was meeting with a woman Ray thought worked for Reynolds Enterprises. Catherine and Walter exchanged another look, this one tense. Describe her, Walter said. Mid-40s, dark hair, expensive suit, confident, like she was used to giving orders. Victoria Wells, Catherine murmured, my COO. And you didn't know she was meeting with Phillips? Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line. No, I did not. Though I'm not entirely surprised. Victoria has ambitions that don't always align with the company's values. She wants your job, Mason guessed. She believes she deserves my job, Catherine corrected, which is not the same thing. Walter shifted in his chair. Victoria and James Phillips are cousins, though they don't advertise the connection. We've suspected for some time that she's been feeding him information about our acquisition targets. Mason felt a chill of understanding. So she knew you were interested in the Horizon property, and likely encouraged Phillips to make a competing offer, Catherine confirmed, though she couldn't have known my true intentions for the site. The pieces were falling into place now. The foundation isn't just about honoring my father's memory, is it? It's also about setting a different direction for Reynolds Enterprises, one that Victoria opposes. Catherine smiled, a hint of approval in her eyes. You're perceptive, Mason. Yes, the Carter Foundation represents a significant shift in our corporate priorities, from pure profit to community impact. It's a shift that not everyone supports, including your son, Walter added. Marcus believes Catherine is squandering resources on sentiment. My son is an excellent financial officer, Catherine said with a sigh, but he lacks vision beyond the next quarterly report. Mason leaned back, processing this new information. The foundation wasn't just a charitable project. It was a strategic move in a corporate power struggle he barely understood. So I'd be stepping into the middle of a family conflict. You'd be stepping into an opportunity to build something meaningful, Catherine countered. The corporate politics are my concern, not yours. But they could affect the foundation's success, Mason pointed out. If Victoria or your son undermine the project, they won't, Catherine said with calm certainty, because the foundation will be independently funded and governed. Once established, it will operate outside their reach. Walter nodded. Catherine has structured it quite deliberately. The initial funding is already in an irrevocable trust. Neither the board nor her successors can redirect those resources. Mason studied Catherine's face, searching for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. He found only resolve and a quiet urgency that spoke to the limited time she believed she had left. I need to think about this, he said finally. Talk to Lily, figure out what it means for our future. Of course, Catherine agreed, but don't take too long. Phillips won't abandon his pursuit of this property, especially now that he knows I'm interested. As they stood to leave, Mason remembered something. The station wagon. Was it really having problems, or was that part of your test? Catherine smiled. Both. I hadn't driven it in years, and it genuinely needed work. But I could have taken it anywhere. I chose to bring it to mechanics who might have treated an elderly woman with respect, regardless of her apparent means. Her expression softened, just as I once brought it to your father. Will I see you again? Before I decide? I'll be at the Palmer Park gazebo tomorrow at noon, Catherine said. It was your father's favorite spot to eat lunch. We had many conversations there. As Catherine and Walter departed, the garage slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Air compressors hissing, metal tools clanging against concrete, the radio playing classic rock just loud enough to be heard over the work. But for Mason, everything had shifted. The familiar space now seemed like a chrysalis, a temporary shelter on the way to something else. Ray approached, wiping his hands on a rag. So, you going to tell me what the Queen of Reynolds Enterprises had to say? Mason hesitated, then gestured toward the office. You might want to sit down for this. Over the next hour, Mason explained everything. Victoria's connection to Phillips, the corporate power struggle, the independent structure of the foundation. Ray listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. This is bigger than we thought, he said when Mason finished. You'd be stepping into some serious deep water, brother. I know. Part of me thinks I should walk away, stick to what I know. And the other part? Mason sighed. The other part keeps thinking about what this could mean for Lily, for the community, for all the people who can't afford to get their cars fixed at places like Precision. Ray nodded slowly. Your dad would be proud, you know, however you decide. Would he? I'm not so sure. He was content being a mechanic, never wanted more. Or maybe he never had the chance to want more, Ray suggested. Different times, different opportunities. The rest of the day passed in a blur of oil changes and brake jobs, Mason's mind elsewhere, even as his hands worked with their usual precision. At 3:30, he left to pick up Lily from school, leaving Ray to close up shop. Lily was waiting on the steps, deep in conversation with her favorite teacher, Mrs. Wilson, a young woman with bright eyes and an endless supply of patience for curious minds. "Mr. Carter," Mrs. Wilson greeted him. "Lily was just telling me about her exciting plans for the garage." Mason winced internally. Was she now? "Oh, yes. A community training center, apprenticeships for high school students, quite visionary for someone her age." Mrs. Wilson smiled. "She mentioned you might be taking on a new role?" "It's still up in the air," Mason hedged. "A lot of details to work out." "Well, I think it's wonderful. Programs like what Lily described could make a real difference for some of our students." She squeezed Lily's shoulder. "Keep me posted. I'd love to help however I can." As they walked to the truck, Mason gave Lily a sidelong look. "So, exciting plans for the garage, huh?" Lily had the good grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I might have mentioned some stuff to Mrs. Wilson. Stuff from the proposal I told you was confidential." "Not exactly. Just the parts about helping kids learn how to fix cars." She adjusted her glasses. "She seemed really interested, Dad. Said lots of kids don't have money for college and need other options." Mason couldn't argue with that. He'd been one of those kids himself, lucky to find a trade he excelled at. "Just try to keep the top secret foundation plans under wraps until things are more settled, okay? Does that mean you're going to do it?" "It means I'm thinking about it, seriously thinking about it." Lily beamed. "I knew you would." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Mason sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, making 2 columns, reasons to accept and reasons to decline. The accept column quickly filled with compelling points: financial security for Lily, community impact, honoring his father's legacy, professional growth. The decline column held fewer entries, but they were significant: fear of failure, lack of business experience, uncertainty about Catherine's true motives. He was still weighing these factors when his phone rang. An unknown number. "Mason Carter. Mr. Carter, Victoria Wells, Reynolds Enterprises." Mason's grip tightened on the phone. "Ms. Wells, how did you get this number?" "I have access to considerable resources," she replied smoothly. "I understand Catherine has approached you with a rather unusual proposal." "That's between me and Mrs. Reynolds." "Nothing involving Reynolds Enterprises is just between you and Catherine," Victoria countered. "As Chief Operating Officer, I have a responsibility to ensure company resources are allocated prudently." Mason chose his words carefully. The foundation would be independently funded. "Ah, so she shared those details. Interesting." Victoria's tone sharpened. "Let me be direct, Mr. Carter. Catherine is making decisions based on sentiment rather than sound business judgment. Her health is not what it once was. She seemed perfectly lucid to me." "Of course she did. Catherine is a master of appearances, but the board has concerns about her decision-making capacity." There was a pause. "Did she tell you about her episodes?" Mason frowned. "Episodes?" "Minor strokes. 3 in the past year, each one followed by questionable decisions." The information landed like a stone in Mason's stomach. Catherine hadn't mentioned any health problems beyond the vague references to her age. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know what you're getting into," Victoria said. "This foundation idea, it's a flight of fancy from a woman who feels her control slipping away. It won't survive her, Mr. Carter. The board won't allow it. She said the funding is already in an irrevocable trust." Victoria laughed softly. "And you believed her? I admire your faith, but business is rarely so straightforward." "What do you want, Ms. Wells?" "I want to offer you an alternative. Phillips is prepared to hire you as service manager for the new precision facility at double your current salary with full benefits and a signing bonus." Mason's grip on the phone tightened. "In exchange for what?" "Simply decline Catherine's offer, that's all. You continue doing what you do best without the burden of running a doomed foundation." "And if I refuse?" Victoria's voice cooled. "Then you'll find yourself attached to a project that will collapse the moment Catherine is no longer at the helm, which I assure you will be sooner rather than later." After she hung up, Mason sat motionless, the phone heavy in his hand. Victoria's words echoed in his mind, raising doubts he thought he had resolved. Was Catherine truly ill? Was the foundation just a desperate attempt to secure a legacy before time ran out? He needed answers, and there was only one person who could provide them. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, autumn asserting itself in earnest. Mason dropped Lily at school with a promise to pick her up early for a special errand, then drove to Palmer Park. The gazebo Catherine had mentioned stood on a small rise overlooking a pond, surrounded by maple trees in full fall splendor. It was exactly the kind of peaceful spot his father would have enjoyed. Catherine was already there when he arrived, seated on a bench with a small picnic basket beside her. She wore casual clothes, slacks and a sweater, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, less formidable than in her business attire, but no less dignified. "You came," she said, smiling as he approached. "I'm glad." Mason sat beside her, noticing for the first time the fine lines around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she opened the basket. "Victoria Wells called me last night." Catherine's smile faded. "I suspected she might. What did she say?" "That you've had strokes, that your health is failing and the foundation won't survive you." Catherine was quiet for a moment, gazing out at the pond where a pair of ducks glided across the surface. Victoria has always excelled at leveraging partial truths for maximum impact. "So it's true about the strokes?" "I had a series of TIAs, transient ischemic attacks, earlier this year," Catherine admitted. "Minor with no lasting cognitive effects. My doctors assure me I'm in excellent health otherwise." "But you didn't think that was worth mentioning." "I didn't want it to influence your decision," she said simply. "This foundation isn't about my health or mortality, Mason. It's about creating something lasting, something that honors your father's legacy of quiet service. And Victoria's claim that the board will shut it down is false," Catherine said firmly. "The trust is legally sound, the funding secure. Victoria knows this, which is why she's attempting to dissuade you directly." Mason studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. "Why does she care so much about stopping this particular project?" Catherine sighed. "Because the Carter Foundation represents a direction for Reynolds Enterprises that she fundamentally opposes. Victoria believes our sole purpose is to maximize shareholder value. I believe we have broader responsibilities to the communities we serve. And this is your way of ensuring your vision continues?" "Partly," Catherine acknowledged, "but it's also about repaying a debt that's been on my conscience for 30 years. "What debt?" "My father refused payment, right?" Catherine reached into her pocket, pulling out an old, folded piece of paper. "This is the note your father left in my car, along with the keychain, the last time I saw him. Read it." Mason unfolded the paper carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably his father's, the same neat measured script that had labeled tool drawers and written birthday cards throughout his childhood. "Eleanor," it began, using Catherine's middle name, "I can't accept your offer of financial support for Mason's education. It's generous beyond words, but some journeys need to be walked without shortcuts. He'll find his path as I found mine. What I will accept is your promise to remember that the most valuable repairs we make aren't to machines, but to broken spirits. Someday, if you find someone who understands this as we do, pass along this reminder. With gratitude, Michael." Mason looked up, his throat tight. "You offered to pay for my education?" Catherine nodded. "After your mother left, Michael was struggling financially. I wanted to help, to establish a trust for your future. He refused, saying it would complicate what was simple. I respected his decision, but I never forgot his request. And now you've found someone who understands," Mason said quietly. "I believe I have," Catherine agreed, "but only you can confirm whether that's true." They sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks circle the pond, listening to the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. It was peaceful here, removed from the noise and pressure of decisions and deadlines. "My father gave up a lot to raise me on his own," Mason said finally. "Worked extra shifts, took on side jobs, fixing neighbors' appliances. Never complained, never seemed to want more than what he had." He paused. "I always thought that was contentment. Now I wonder if it was resignation." Catherine considered this. "Perhaps it was both. Michael found joy in his work, in raising you, but he also carried regrets, opportunities not taken, roads not traveled. Did he ever talk about my mother? Only once, Catherine said carefully. He said she needed things he couldn't provide. Security, status, certainty. That sometimes love isn't enough when two people want fundamentally different futures. Mason nodded, a familiar ache resurfaces. His mother had left when he was 5, disappearing from his life so completely it sometimes felt like she'd never existed at all. Lily asks about her grandmother sometimes. I never know what to say. The truth, as much as is appropriate, Catherine suggested. Children are remarkably resilient when faced with honest explanations. Like the truth about this foundation, about what it could mean for our future? Exactly like that. Mason took a deep breath, the crisp air filling his lungs. I need to think about what this means for Lily. For me, it's not just a job change, it's a complete life change. Of course, Catherine said, but don't overthink it, Mason. Sometimes the most important decisions are made with the heart rather than the head. As Mason drove away from the park, his mind was clearer than it had been in days. Victoria's warnings, while concerning, hadn't shaken his growing conviction that Catherine was sincere. The note from his father had touched something deep within him, a connection to the man he'd admired more than anyone, a glimpse into his thoughts and hopes. When he picked up Lily from school, she immediately sensed something had changed. You look different, she said as she climbed into the truck. Did you talk to Mrs. Reynolds again? I did, Mason said, and I thought you might like to meet her. That's our special errand today. Lily's eyes widened. Really? We're going to meet her? Where? Is she at her big office building? Does she have a helicopter? Mason laughed. Slow down, kiddo. She's at her house, and I don't think she has a helicopter. At least, she didn't mention one. Catherine's home was not what Mason had expected. Rather than a downtown penthouse or gated estate, she lived in a historic craftsman on a tree-lined street, large and well-maintained, but understated. A housekeeper answered the door, leading them through a foyer filled with books and art to a sunroom at the back of the house. Catherine was seated in a wicker chair, reading glasses perched on her nose, a stack of papers in her lap. She looked up as they entered, her face warming with a smile. Mason, and this must be Lily. I'm so pleased to meet you. Lily, usually confident to the point of precociousness, suddenly went shy. She pressed against Mason's side, peering at Catherine with curious eyes. Are you really a billionaire? Lily, Mason admonished gently. Catherine laughed. It's all right. Yes, Lily, I am wealthy, though I don't often think of myself that way. Does that matter to you? Lily considered the question with surprising seriousness. No, Dad says people are who they are, not what they have. Your father is a wise man, Catherine said, gesturing for them to sit. Would you like some lemonade or perhaps hot chocolate? It's getting chilly out. Hot chocolate, please, Lily said, her shyness beginning to fade. As the housekeeper went to prepare their drinks, Catherine engaged Lily in conversation, asking about school, her science projects, her friends. Mason watched in amazement as his daughter, initially hesitant, blossomed under Catherine's genuine interest, soon chattering away about her plans to build a working model of a 4-stroke engine for the science fair. You know, Catherine said, I have something you might find interesting. She rose, crossing to a cabinet in the corner. From a drawer, she withdrew a small box, which she brought back to Lily. These belong to my husband, Thomas. He was an engineer before he became a businessman. Lily opened the box to reveal a collection of precision tools, calipers, micrometers, small wrenches, and measuring devices, all nestled in velvet. They're beautiful, Lily breathed, touching them reverently. They're for someone who understands that precision matters, Catherine said. Someone who knows that being off by even a millimeter can mean the difference between function and failure. Like Dad with engines, Lily said. He can hear when something's wrong, even when the computer says everything's okay. Exactly like that. Catherine glanced at Mason. That kind of intuition can't be taught. It has to be felt. As their visit continued, Mason observed the easy rapport developing between Catherine and Lily. There was nothing forced or artificial about it, just two people connecting across generations, finding common ground in their curiosity and respect for precision. When it was time to leave, Catherine walked them to the door. Lily, would you mind waiting on the porch for a moment? I'd like a quick word with your father. Once Lily was out of earshot, Catherine turned to Mason. She's remarkable. You've done an extraordinary job raising her alone. I've done my best, Mason said. Some days are better than others. All days are a gift, Catherine replied, even the difficult ones. She paused. Have you made your decision about the foundation? Mason nodded. I have. I'll do it on one condition, which is complete transparency moving forward about your health, about the corporate politics, about anything that could affect the foundation's success. No more surprises. Catherine smiled. Agreed. When can you start? I need to talk to Frank, make arrangements for Horizon's transition. But soon. Next week, maybe. Perfect. I'll have Abright draw up the final paperwork. She hesitated, then added, There's one more thing, Mason. Something I'd like to do for Lily, with your permission. What's that? I'd like to establish a college fund for her. Not a trust that restricts her choices, but a simple account to ensure she can pursue whatever education suits her passions. Mason started to refuse instinctively, his father's independence echoing in his mind. Then he stopped, considering what his father had actually written. Some journeys need to be walked without shortcuts. But did that mean refusing all help, all support, or did it mean ensuring the journey had purpose, regardless of how it was funded? Lily wants to be an engineer, he said finally. Always has since she was old enough to hold a wrench. That kind of education isn't cheap. No, it isn't, Catherine agreed. All right, but it needs to be something she earns, maybe a matching program where she contributes through grades or community service. Catherine nodded. I think that's very wise. We'll work out the details. As Mason drove home with Lily, the late afternoon sun painting the world in golden light, he felt a sense of possibility he hadn't experienced in years. The future that had seemed so constrained just days ago now stretched before him with new pathways, new horizons. I liked her, Lily said suddenly. Mrs. Reynolds. She doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby. No, she doesn't, Mason agreed. Are we going to work with her on the foundation thing? Mason glanced at his daughter, so perceptive, so ready for whatever came next. Yes, we are. Lily grinned, her gap-toothed smile illuminated by the setting sun. Good, because I already told Mrs. Wilson you said yes. Mason laughed, shaking his head. Of course you did. The next morning, Mason arrived at Horizon Auto earlier than usual, hoping to speak with Frank privately before the day's chaos began. To his surprise, the lights were already on, and not just Frank, but Ray, Derek, and Pete were gathered in the break room, coffee mugs in hand, an unusual tension in the air. What's going on? Mason asked, pausing in the doorway. Frank looked up, his expression grim. Phillips was here at dawn, made a new offer, 20% above Reynolds' bid. Cash, no contingencies. Mason felt his stomach drop. Did you accept? Not yet. Told him I needed to talk to my people first. Frank gestured to the empty chair. Sit down, Mason. We need to figure this out. Mason joined the impromptu meeting, the weight of multiple futures settling on his shoulders. I met with Catherine Reynolds yesterday, decided to accept her foundation offer. We figured, Ray said. Question is, what happens now that Phillips has upped the ante? Derek leaned forward. Look, man, we all respect what you're trying to do, but this is Frank's retirement that we're talking about. 20% more is life-changing money. Pete nodded. And Phillips is guaranteeing jobs for all of us at the new precision location. It's a sure thing versus an experiment. Mason looked at Frank. It's your garage, your decision. I understand if you need to take Phillips' offer. Frank sighed heavily. That's just it, Mason. It's not just about the money. This place has been my life for 30 years. Selling to Phillips means watching it get gutted, turned into another soulless chain operation. He shook his head. Reynolds' plan at least preserves what matters, the heart of what we do here. But if it fails, Derek pointed out, we all lose, not just the money, but the jobs, the community, everything. Mason considered their concerns, recognizing the fear beneath the practical objections. You're right, it is a risk. But I believe in what Catherine is trying to build, and I believe we can make it work, together. Even us? Pete asked skeptically. Let's be real, Mason. We gave you hell about helping that old lady, who turned out to be Catherine Reynolds. Why would you want us involved in your fancy new foundation? Because you're good mechanics, Mason said simply, and because everyone deserves a second chance to be better than they were yesterday. Ray cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think Mason's right. This foundation could be something special, something that lasts beyond all of us. A heavy silence fell over the room, each man weighing personal interests against larger possibilities. Finally, Frank spoke. Tell you what, let's put it to a vote. Democratic, like America's supposed to be. He looked around the table. All in favor of accepting Reynolds' offer and supporting Mason's foundation. Raise your hand. Ray's hand went up immediately. After a moment's hesitation, Frank raised his as well. Derek and Pete exchanged glance, their expressions conflicted. Come on, guys, Ray urged. When's the last time we had a shot at doing something that matters? Pete sighed, then slowly raised his hand. What the hell? My girlfriend always says I need to think bigger. All eyes turned to Derek. He fidgeted with his coffee mug, avoiding their gazes. Phillips promised me a team lead position, he admitted. More money than I've ever made. And less satisfaction than you deserve, Mason countered. You're better than precision, Derek. You're a craftsman, not an assembly line worker. Derek looked up, surprise flashing across his face at the unexpected praise. Slowly, reluctantly, he raised his hand. Fine. But if this thing fails, I'm blaming all of you. Frank slapped the table, a smile breaking through his gruff exterior. Then it's settled. We tell Phillips to take his offer and shove it somewhere the sun doesn't shine. He looked at Mason. Call your fancy lawyer friend. Let's make this official before anyone changes their mind. As the others dispersed to begin the day's work, Ray lingered, waiting until they were alone. You sure about this, Mason? It's a big step. Honestly, I'm terrified, Mason admitted, but I keep thinking about what my dad would say, about doing what matters, not just what's safe. Ray nodded. Michael would be proud. Hell, I'm proud, and I'm just the idiot who's followed you into every bad decision since high school. Mason laughed. This might be the worst one yet. Or the best, Ray countered. Guess we'll find out. The morning unfolded with a new energy, the garage humming with purpose rather than resignation. Mason called Abright, who promised to expedite the paperwork. By noon, it was settled. Horizon Auto would become the first Carter Foundation community garage, with the formal transition scheduled for the following Monday. Mason was underneath the Subaru, replacing a serpentine belt, when a shadow fell across the concrete. He slid out to find Victoria Wells standing over him, her tailored suit incongruous against the grimy backdrop of the garage. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice cool, I understand congratulations are in order. Mason stood wiping his hands on a rag. Ms. Wells, didn't expect to see you here. Clearly. She glanced around the garage with thinly veiled disdain. I wanted to speak with you personally one last time before you make a terrible mistake. I've already signed the papers, Mason said. It's done. Papers can be unmade, Victoria replied, especially when the signatory lacks capacity. Mason stiffened. What are you talking about? Catherine had another episode last night, Victoria said, more severe than the previous ones. The board is meeting as we speak to discuss a temporary transfer of authority while she recovers. You're lying. Am I? Victoria produced her phone, showing Mason a news alert from the local business journal. Reynolds Enterprises CEO Catherine Reynolds hospitalized. Condition unknown. Mason felt his heart sink. Is she all right? For now, Victoria said, pocketing her phone. But this incident makes clear what I tried to tell you before. Catherine is not well, and her pet projects are built on shifting sand. The foundation is legally established, Mason insisted. The funding secure. Victoria smiled thinly. Perhaps, but foundations need more than legal structures to succeed, Mr. Carter. They need relationships, community support, corporate partnerships, all of which require goodwill from Reynolds Enterprises leadership. Are you threatening to sabotage the foundation? I'm simply pointing out reality, Victoria said. Without Catherine actively championing this project, its chances of success diminish considerably. She adjusted her sleeve, revealing an expensive watch. My offer still stands. A secure position with precision, double your current salary. All you need to do is walk away from this fantasy. Mason studied her, seeing beyond the polished exterior to the calculation beneath. Why do you care so much about stopping this? What are you afraid of? Something flashed in Victoria's eyes, a brief crack in her composure. I've spent 20 years making Reynolds Enterprises a model of corporate efficiency and profitability. I won't stand by while Catherine dismantles that legacy on a sentimental whim. It's more than sentiment, Mason said. It's about making a difference in people's lives. Real people, not just shareholders. How charmingly naive, Victoria replied. Well, when your foundation inevitably collapses, don't say I didn't warn you. As she turned to leave, Mason called after her. I'm going to visit Catherine today. Victoria paused. Memorial Hospital, 6th floor. She glanced back over her shoulder. Perhaps seeing her condition firsthand will bring you to your senses. After she left, Mason stood motionless, the rag twisted in his hands. Ray approached cautiously, having observed the exchange from a distance. What was that about? Catherine's in the hospital, Mason said, his voice tight. Some kind of episode. Victoria thinks the board might remove her temporarily. Ray whistled low. That's convenient timing. Too convenient, Mason agreed. I need to see her. Can you cover for me this afternoon? Of course, go. And Mason? Ray squeezed his shoulder. Don't let Victoria get in your head. She's playing chess while pretending it's checkers. The drive to Memorial Hospital felt interminable. Each stoplight an eternity. Mason's mind raced with scenarios, each worse than the last. Had Catherine concealed the seriousness of her condition? Was Victoria right about the foundation's vulnerability? Had he made a catastrophic mistake that would affect not just his future but Lily's? The 6th floor was quiet, the hushed efficiency of a high-end medical facility. At the nurse's station, Mason identified himself, expecting resistance. To his surprise, the nurse nodded immediately. Mrs. Reynolds mentioned you might come. Room 612. The room was spacious and private, more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. Catherine sat propped up in bed, reading, glasses perched on her nose. Document folders spread across the blanket. Walter dozed in a chair nearby, a newspaper folded in his lap. Catherine looked up as Mason entered, her expression brightening. Mason, I was hoping you'd come. He approached the bed, relief washing over him. You look a lot better than I expected. Victoria got to you, I see, Catherine said with a sigh. Sit, please. Walter, wake up. We have company. Walter stirred, blinking owlishly. Mason, good. Now maybe she'll listen to reason. What happened? Mason asked, taking the offered chair. A minor TIA, Catherine explained. Similar to the others, but because it happened at a board meeting, it caused rather more drama than necessary. Victoria said it was severe that the board was meeting to temporarily replace you. Catherine and Walter exchanged knowing looks. Victoria has been angling for my position for years, Catherine said. She sees my health as her opportunity. And the board meeting? Is happening, Walter confirmed, but not to replace Catherine. The agenda is to review Victoria's conduct, specifically her undisclosed relationship with Phillips and her attempts to undermine company initiatives. Mason frowned. You knew about her meeting with Phillips? About her call to me? We suspected, Catherine said, so we set a trap. The only people who knew about your hospital visit were Victoria and my personal assistant, who is unquestionably loyal. And here you are, Walter added, which tells us exactly who's been leaking information. Mason leaned back, processing this new information. So your condition isn't serious? My doctor wants me to rest for a few days, Catherine said. Standard protocol after a TIA. But there's no lasting damage, physical or cognitive. And the foundation? Proceeding exactly as planned, Catherine assured him. The papers are filed, the funding transferred. Victoria can't touch it, regardless of what happens with the board. Mason exhaled slowly, tension draining from his shoulders. I'm glad you're okay. When Victoria showed me that news alert, she played on your concerns, Catherine said gently. It's what she does best, finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them. I thought I'd made a terrible mistake, Mason admitted. That I'd put everything at risk based on trust that wasn't justified. Catherine reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Trust is always a risk, Mason, but without it, nothing worthwhile can be built. Walter cleared his throat. Speaking of building, there's something we need to discuss. The Reynolds board may choose to distance Victoria, but her concerns about the foundation will resonate with some members. We need to demonstrate immediate, tangible success. How? Mason asked. We haven't even started operations. Actually, Catherine said, we have an opportunity. James Phillips has been approaching other independent garages in the area with predatory buyout offers. 3 have already accepted. The Martinez family garage on Elm, Mason guessed. And Kowalski's on 10th? Exactly, Walter confirmed. Plus Jackson's over in Riverside, all established community businesses being absorbed into the precision model. So what can we do? They've already sold. Catherine smiled. Not quite. There's a 7-day rescission period in Phillips' contracts, a detail his lawyers buried in the fine print, assuming no one would exercise the option. If those owners had a better alternative, the foundation could counteroffer, Mason realized. Keep them independent, but provide support, equipment upgrades. Precisely, Walter said, but it would require someone to approach them immediately, to explain the vision before the rescission period expires. Someone they would trust, Catherine added. Someone who understands their challenges because he's lived them himself. Mason felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, not as a burden now, but as a purpose. When do we start? Today, Catherine said. Right now, Walter has the files on each garage, their situations, their needs. The foundation can offer equipment upgrades, business support, inclusion in a referral network. But most importantly, Walter added, dignity, the chance to remain independent while being part of something larger. As Mason left the hospital an hour later, files tucked under his arm and a clear mission before him, he felt a profound shift in his understanding of his place in the world. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore, though he would always carry those skills and that identity. He was becoming something more, a builder of communities, a preserver of livelihoods, a creator of opportunities. His father had fixed cars because they needed fixing, because the people who drove them needed to get home, to work, to school, to doctor's appointments. The vehicles were never just machines, they were lifelines, connections, necessities. In preserving independent garages, Mason wasn't just honoring his father's memory, he was extending his legacy in ways Michael Carter could never have imagined. As he drove toward Martinez's garage, rehearsing his pitch in his mind, Mason glanced at the keychain hanging from his rearview mirror, the leather gear with the M that had passed from Catherine's husband to his father and now to him. 3 generations connected by a simple belief that how you treat people matters more than what you can get from them. The old station wagon might have brought Catherine into his life by chance, but what happened next would be by choice. His choice to build something that would outlast all of them. The autumn sun hung low in the afternoon sky, casting long shadows across Martinez's garage as Mason pulled into the cracked concrete lot. The modest brick building had stood on this corner for 3 generations, a testament to the family's perseverance through changing times. A hand-painted sign above the entrance read, Martinez Auto Service, Este in 1957. The letters faded but proud. Inside, the familiar symphony of metal against metal, air compressors hissing and classic rock playing from an old radio created the universal soundtrack of neighborhood garages everywhere. The scent of motor oil, rubber, and coffee mingled in the air, the perfume of honest work that Mason had known all his life. Elena Martinez looked up from the invoices spread across the counter, her dark hair streaked with premature silver, lines of worry etched around her eyes. At 42, she carried the weight of her father's legacy and her family's future on shoulders that seemed increasingly burdened. Mason Carter, she said, surprise softening her features. What brings you to our side of town? Don't tell me Frank's sending referrals now. Mason smiled, placing his weathered Horizon auto cap on the counter between them. Not exactly. I'm here about Phillips. Heard he made you an offer. Elena's expression closed, wariness replacing welcome. News travels fast. It's a small community, Mason said, and Phillips isn't exactly subtle when he's hunting. Is that what he's doing? Hunting? What would you call buying up every independent garage in the county? Elena sighed, gesturing toward the back office. Let's talk where my guys can't hear. They're nervous enough as it is. The office was small but meticulously organized. Filing cabinets labeled by year, framed ASE certifications on the walls, and a desk that had clearly belonged to Elena's father, judging by the worn spot where generations of elbows had rested while calculating estimates. A photo of three men standing proudly in front of a much younger version of the garage held the place of honor on the wall. Grandfather, father, and uncle, the Martinez men who had built this business from nothing. Phillips offered $700,000, Elena said without preamble, sinking into the desk chair. More than double what this place is worth on paper. Mason whistled softly. That's a lot of money. Life-changing money, Elena agreed. Enough to pay off my father's medical bills, send my kids to college, maybe even retire somewhere warm. She rubbed her temples. But it would mean the end of Martinez's. Phillips made it clear he wants the location, not the business. What if there was another option, Mason asked, placing Walter's folder on the desk. One that lets you keep Martinez's alive while still securing your family's future. Elena's eyes narrowed. What kind of option? A partnership with the Carter Foundation for Community Automotive Service. For the next hour, Mason outlined Catherine's vision. Independent garages working together, sharing resources and knowledge while maintaining their unique identities. Equipment upgrades, business support, apprenticeship programs for local youth, a network that could compete with chains like Precision without sacrificing the personal touch that made places like Martinez's special. As he spoke, Mason could see the skepticism in Elena's eyes gradually giving way to something else. Not quite hope, but perhaps the possibility of it. It sounds too good to be true, she said finally. What's the catch? No catch, Mason assured her, and the foundation is fully funded. Catherine Reynolds is committed to preserving community businesses like yours. Reynolds? Elena looked startled. As in Reynolds Enterprises? The development company? The same. Catherine has personal reasons for wanting to support independent garages. Elena leaned back, studying Mason with renewed interest. And what's your role in all this? I'm the executive director, Mason said, the title still feeling foreign on his tongue. As of last week. You? Elena laughed, though not unkindly. No offense, Mason, but you're a mechanic, not a foundation director. Believe me, I'm as surprised as you are, Mason admitted. But sometimes the right person for a job isn't the one with the fanciest degree. Sometimes it's the one who understands the work from the inside out. Elena's gaze drifted to the photograph of her family. My grandfather started this place with a toolbox and a dream. My father expanded it during the oil crisis when everyone said he was crazy. I took over when he got sick, even though people said a woman couldn't run an auto shop. She looked back at Mason. We've never taken the easy road. Why start now? Mason smiled. That's exactly why the foundation needs places like Martinez's. You're not just fixing cars, you're preserving a way of doing business that's disappearing too fast. So instead of selling to Phillips, I'd partner with your foundation? Yes. You'd maintain ownership and control, but with access to resources, equipment, and support that would otherwise be out of reach. Elena drummed her fingers on the desk, thinking. I'd need to see everything in writing. Have my lawyer review it. Of course, Mason said, sliding the folder toward her. Take your time, but remember your rescission period with Phillips expires in 3 days. 2, Elena corrected grimly. He's coming Monday morning for the final signatures. Then I'll come Sunday evening, Mason promised, rising to leave. For your answer. Outside, Mason paused by his truck, looking back at the garage that had served this neighborhood for over 60 years. If Phillips had his way, it would soon be just another soulless precision auto location, identical to hundreds of others, with standardized service that prioritized speed over quality and profit over people. Not if he could help it. The rest of the week unfolded in a blur of activity. By day, Mason continued working at Horizon, handling repairs and managing the transition. By night, he pored over foundation documents, preparing for his new role while visiting other garage owners throughout the county. Kowalski's on 10th Street, where 3 generations of Polish-American mechanics had maintained the vehicles of the city's northeast side. Jackson's in Riverside, owned by Malcolm Jackson, a former military mechanic who offered free services to veterans down on their luck. Each garage had its own story, its own place in the community fabric, and each owner listened with increasing interest as Mason explained the foundation's vision. By Friday evening, all three had tentatively agreed to rescind their contracts with Phillips, pending final review of Catherine's offer. On Saturday, Catherine was released from the hospital. Mason drove her home, Lily chattering excitedly from the back seat about the engine model she was building for the science fair. The easy rapport between his daughter and Catherine continued to amaze him. Two souls separated by 6 decades of life experience, yet connected by a shared curiosity about how things worked. Mrs. Wilson says I might win first place, Lily announced, especially since Dad's helping me make it actually run on real fuel. Just a few drops of alcohol in a controlled environment, Mason clarified quickly. Completely safe. Catherine smiled. I have no doubt. Your father doesn't take unnecessary risks, Lily. It's one of his finest qualities. At Catherine's home, Walter was waiting with news from the Reynolds board meeting. Victoria had been placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation into her unauthorized dealings with Phillips. The board stopped short of removing her permanently, Walter explained, as they settled in the sunroom. They're worried about market perception. A sudden executive departure could spook investors. So she's wounded but not defeated, Catherine mused. That makes her more dangerous, not less. What can she do now? Mason asked. The foundation is established, the funding secured, the garage owners are coming around. Catherine and Walter exchanged glances. Victoria has connections throughout the business community, Catherine said carefully, including with certain banking institutions that hold mortgages on commercial properties. The implication hit Mason like a physical blow. She could pressure the banks to call in loans, force the garage owners to sell to Phillips regardless of our offer. It's a possibility we need to prepare for, Walter confirmed, especially with the Martinez property. Elena's father refinanced 5 years ago when he needed capital for medical treatments. So even if Elena wants to partner with us, she might not have a choice, Catherine finished, unless we can neutralize Victoria's influence quickly. As Mason drove home that evening, the weight of responsibility pressed against his chest. It wasn't just about preserving his father's legacy anymore. It was about protecting people like Elena Martinez, Malcolm Jackson, and the Kowalski family from predatory business practices that valued profit over community. Sunday dawned clear and cool, the kind of perfect autumn day that seemed designed for new beginnings. Mason spent the morning with Lily, helping her fine-tune her engine model, then dropped her at a friend's house for a sleepover. Good luck with Miss Martinez, Lily said as she hopped out of the truck. Tell her that old garages are like grandparents. They have the best stories and know all the secrets. Mason laughed. When did you get so wise? Mrs. Reynolds says wisdom doesn't wait for age, Lily replied with a grin. It just needs an open heart. By evening, Mason was parked outside Martinez's garage again, a formal offer from the Carter Foundation in his hands and a knot of anticipation in his stomach. The lights were on inside, a solitary figure visible through the window. Elena met him at the door, her expression unreadable. You're right on time. Inside, the garage felt different after hours. Quieter, more intimate, the tools and equipment at rest like sleeping sentinels. Elena led him to the office where papers were spread across the desk, some bearing Phillips' logo, others from the Carter Foundation. I've been comparing the offers all day, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Trying to make the right choice for my family, for my father's legacy. And, Mason asked, trying to keep the tension from his voice. And then I got a call from my bank, Elena continued, informing me that my business loan has been reassessed. They're requiring full payment by the end of the month. Mason's heart sank. Victoria, Elena looked up sharply. You know about this? We suspected she might try something like this, Mason admitted. Victoria Wells is Catherine Reynolds' COO. She's been working with Phillips behind the scenes. So this foundation offer, it's part of some corporate power struggle? Elena's voice hardened. Are you using independent garage owners as pawns, Mason? No, Mason said firmly. The foundation is Catherine's genuine attempt to preserve what corporations like Precision want to destroy. Victoria is fighting it because it threatens her vision of what Reynolds Enterprises should be. That doesn't help me much, Elena said bitterly. I need $300,000 by the end of the month, or I lose everything. Phillips' offer is looking like my only option. Mason took a deep breath. What if the foundation could help with the loan? How? By buying me out instead of Phillips? That's not preserving my independence. It's just changing masters. Not buying you out, Mason clarified. Refinancing. The foundation has capital that could secure a new loan at better terms through a different bank. You'd maintain ownership, but with breathing room to grow rather than constantly fighting to survive. Elena stared at him, searching for deception. Why would Catherine Reynolds care about a small garage like mine? Mason hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out the leather keychain. 30 years ago, Catherine's husband died, leaving her with only memories and an old station wagon. When that car broke down, a mechanic named Michael Carter fixed it for free. Not because he wanted anything, but because he saw someone in need and had the skills to help. Your father, Elena guessed softly. Mason nodded. Catherine never forgot that kindness. Now she wants to ensure that people like my dad, people like you, can continue serving their communities with dignity. Elena was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving from the keychain to the photo of her family on the wall. My grandfather used to say that a garage isn't just a place to fix cars, it's a place to keep a community moving forward. She looked back at Mason. I want to believe in what you're offering. I really do. Then let me prove it's real, Mason said. Come with me tomorrow morning. Meet Catherine yourself. See the foundation headquarters, the first Carter garage, before you make your final decision. Phillips is expecting my signature at 9 a.m. Tell him you need until noon. If you're not convinced by what you see, you can still take his offer. Elena considered this, then nodded slowly. All right, one chance, Mason, for my father's sake. Mason left Martinez's with cautious optimism, immediately calling Catherine to update her on the situation. She listened intently, then made a single call to her bank, arranging for an emergency refinancing option for Martinez's garage. It won't be cheap, she warned Mason. The foundation will need to guarantee the loan. If Elena defaults, she won't, Mason said with confidence he didn't fully feel. Martinez's has survived 60 years of economic ups and downs. With the right support, it'll survive 60 more. The next morning dawned with unexpected drama. Mason arrived at Horizon Auto to find the entrance blocked by two precision auto tow trucks. James Phillips stood in the lot, directing his men as they unloaded equipment. Tool chests, diagnostic machines, branded signs. Frank met Mason at the side entrance, his face flushed with anger. Phillips showed up at 7, claiming he's taking possession today. Says the sale is final. That's impossible, Mason protested. The papers aren't signed yet. Catherine's lawyers confirmed everything's in order. Tell that to Phillips, Frank growled. He's acting like he owns the place already. Inside, the mood was tense. Ray, Derek, and Pete stood in a tight cluster, watching as Phillips' men continued bringing in equipment. Victoria Wells stood slightly apart, her tailored suit incongruous against the industrial backdrop, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. Ah, Mr. Carter, Phillips called when he spotted Mason. Just the man I wanted to see. I was explaining to your colleagues that Precision Auto is taking immediate possession of these premises. That's not possible, Mason said evenly. The sale to the Carter Foundation is finalized. The deed transferred last week. Phillips smiled, pulling a document from his jacket. Actually, I have here a court order granting Precision temporary control of this property pending resolution of ownership claims. He held it out. You'll see it's all quite legal. Mason scanned the document, his stomach nodding. It appeared legitimate, an emergency injunction based on a claim that Catherine Reynolds lacked capacity to execute the foundation contracts due to medical incapacity. This is nonsense, Mason said, looking up to find Victoria watching him with cool triumph. Catherine is perfectly capable. Her doctors have confirmed it. The court disagreed, Victoria said smoothly. At least temporarily. I provided sworn testimony regarding Catherine's recent episodes, along with evidence of her increasingly erratic decision-making. You mean like firing you? Ray interjected. Victoria's smile tightened. I'm on administrative leave pending an investigation that will ultimately vindicate me. In the meantime, the court has frozen all transactions related to the so-called Carter Foundation until Catherine's competency can be formally evaluated. Mason felt a surge of anger, but fought to keep his voice steady. This won't stand. As soon as Catherine appears before a judge, that won't happen today, Phillips interrupted. And today is what matters. I have appointments with the Martinez, Kowalski, and Jackson garages. By noon, all four properties will be under precision control. Elena won't sign with you, Mason insisted. Not once she sees what you're really after. Phillips chuckled. Ms. Martinez doesn't have much choice given her financial situation. A situation that, I might add, became considerably more urgent when her bank called in her loan. He checked his watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have acquisitions to complete. As Phillips and Victoria departed, Mason stood frozen, the injunction clutched in his hand. Everything was unraveling. The foundation, the community garages, his father's legacy, all of it slipping away because of a legal maneuver he hadn't anticipated. What now, boss? Ray asked quietly. Mason looked around at the faces watching him. Frank, Ray, Derek, Pete. Men who had voted to trust his vision over Phillips' promises. Men who now stood to lose everything. We fight back, Mason said, reaching for his phone. Start with the truth. The next hour passed in a flurry of calls. Mason contacted Catherine, explaining the situation, while Ray reached out to Elena Martinez, warning her about Phillips' tactics. Frank called his lawyer friend for advice on the injunction, while Derek and Pete began removing Precision's equipment from the garage. They have a court order, Frank warned. For temporary control, not for cluttering our workspace with their junk, Mason countered. Stack it all in the corner. Carefully. By 9:30, Catherine and Walter had arrived, accompanied by Abright and two other attorneys. Catherine looked formidable despite her recent hospitalization. Every inch the CEO in a tailored suit, her silver hair immaculate, her posture unbending. This injunction is preposterous, Abright declared after reviewing the document, based entirely on hearsay and Victoria's twisted interpretation of medical events. But it's effective until a hearing, Catherine noted grimly, which Phillips and Victoria know could take days to schedule. By which time they'll have locked up all the independent garages in the county, Walter added, creating a monopoly that will be nearly impossible to break. Mason paced the garage floor, frustration building. There has to be something we can do. Elena and the others are making decisions based on lies and manipulation. Perhaps, Catherine said thoughtfully, it's time to change the battlefield. What do you mean? Catherine turned to Walter. Remember Thomas's favorite saying about business disputes? Walter's weathered face creased in a smile. When you can't win in the courtroom, take it to the court of public opinion. Exactly, Catherine faced the group. Phillips and Victoria are operating in the shadows, using legal maneuvers and financial pressure. Let's bring everything into the light. Within minutes, a plan took shape. Mason would intercept Elena at her garage before Phillips arrived, bringing her to Horizon where Catherine would make her case in person. Meanwhile, Walter would contact his media connections, local news, business journals, community papers, inviting them to witness a watershed moment in local business preservation. Phillips wants to create a monopoly by picking off independent garages one by one, Catherine explained. Let's gather them all in one place and show the community what's really at stake. A public showdown, Ray said with a grin. I like it. Mason glanced at his watch. Phillips is meeting Elena at 10. That gives me 15 minutes to get there. Take my car, Catherine offered, handing him keys to her Mercedes. It might help make the right impression. The drive to Martinez's garage was a blur of adrenaline and determination. Mason arrived to find Elena in the parking lot, watching as a precision auto van unloaded signage, the first visible step in erasing 60 years of Martinez family history. Elena, Mason called, hurrying toward her. Don't sign anything, not yet. Elena turned, surprise registering at the sight of Mason emerging from Catherine Reynolds' luxury sedan. Mason, what's going on? Phillips lied to you, to all of us. Mason quickly explained the situation. The injunction, Victoria's manipulation, the plan to create a county-wide monopoly. Catherine Reynolds is at Horizon right now, ready to meet with all the garage owners Phillips is targeting. This is your chance to hear the truth before making a decision that can't be undone. Elena hesitated, glancing back at the precision workers. Phillips will be here any minute. Let him come to Horizon, Mason said. Let him make his case alongside Catherine, in full public view. If his offer is really better for you, for your family, then take it. But don't decide based on pressure and half-truths. After a moment's consideration, Elena nodded. All right, but this better not be another manipulation, Mason. My family's future is at stake. I know, Mason said quietly. So is mine. By the time they returned to Horizon, the scene had transformed. News vans lined the street, reporters and photographers gathered in the parking lot. Inside, the garage had been hastily rearranged. Workbenches pushed aside to create a meeting space. Chairs set up facing a makeshift podium. Walter was directing the setup with the efficiency of someone who had managed corporate events for decades. Malcolm Jackson from Riverside was already there, deep in conversation with Catherine. The Kowalski brothers arrived minutes later, looking confused but curious. Community members began filtering in as well. Longtime customers, neighborhood residents, small business owners from surrounding blocks. What is all this? Elena asked, taking in the growing crowd. The truth, Mason said simply. In the open, where it belongs. Catherine approached, extending her hand to Elena. Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming. I'm Catherine Reynolds. Elena shook the offered hand, her expression wary. Your foundation wants to partner with my garage. Why? Because businesses like yours are the backbone of healthy communities, Catherine replied without hesitation. And because I believe that quality, personal service shouldn't be sacrificed on the altar of corporate efficiency. Before Elena could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. James Phillips had arrived, Victoria Wells a half step behind him. His confident stride faltered slightly at the sight of cameras and reporters, but he recovered quickly, adjusting his tie as he approached. What's the meaning of this? He demanded, glaring at Mason. Some kind of publicity stunt? No, Mr. Phillips, Catherine said, stepping forward. This is transparency, something your acquisition strategy has notably lacked. Phillips's eyes narrowed. Mrs. Reynolds, shouldn't you be resting, given your condition? My condition is excellent, thank you, Catherine replied coolly, as my doctors would be happy to confirm under oath when we challenge your fraudulent injunction. Victoria moved to Philip's side. This changes nothing. The court order stands until a hearing. Any contract signed today would be invalid. We're not here to sign contracts, Mason interjected. We're here to have an honest conversation about the future of automotive service in this community. He turned to address the gathered garage owners. Mr. Phillips has made each of you an offer. So has the Carter Foundation. Today, you'll hear directly from both sides, in public, with nothing hidden. The next hour unfolded like a community forum. Phillips presented his vision for Precision Auto's expansion, standardized service, corporate efficiency, guaranteed parts. Catherine countered with the Foundation's approach, independent ownership, shared resources, preserved identities. Questions came from garage owners, customers, reporters. No legal documents were signed, but something more binding took shape. Public commitment. Elena Martinez was the first to speak up. My grandfather started our garage because people in our neighborhood needed someone they could trust, not just to fix their cars, but to tell them the truth, even when that meant saying, you don't need an expensive repair. She looked from Phillips to Catherine. I can't see that level of honesty surviving in a corporate chain. Malcolm Jackson nodded in agreement. Half my customers can't afford market rates. I work with them because they're neighbors, not just customers. Would Precision honor those arrangements, Mr. Phillips? Phillips shifted uncomfortably. Precision operates on a standardized pricing model. It ensures consistency across all locations. In other words, no, Malcolm translated. You'd charge full price to the single mother whose car she needs to get to her third job. Murmurs spread through the crowd. A local reporter raised her hand. Mr. Phillips, is it true that Precision Auto raises service prices by an average of 27% after acquiring independent garages? Phillips forced a smile. We adjust pricing to reflect the enhanced service experience and guaranteed parts quality that Precision provides. And is it also true, the reporter continued, that Precision has terminated an average of 60% of existing staff after acquisitions, replacing them with less experienced technicians at lower wages? Victoria stepped forward. That's proprietary business information. I'd like to know where you're getting these figures. Walter Green cleared his throat. From Precision's own internal projections, I believe. Documents that were shared with Reynolds Enterprises during a proposed partnership discussion last year. Victoria paled slightly. Those documents were confidential. Indeed they were, Catherine agreed. Yet somehow they found their way to Mr. Phillips. Curious, isn't it? The momentum was shifting visibly. Community members began sharing stories of relationships with their local garages. The time Malcolm Jackson stayed open late to fix a nurse's car before her night shift. The payment plans Elena Martinez offered families struggling financially. The emergency repairs the Kowalski brothers performed during the last major storm. Through it all, Mason watched Phillips and Victoria growing increasingly uncomfortable. Their business model relied on quiet, separate negotiations, divide and conquer. Faced with united garage owners and a supportive community, their strategy was crumbling. "This is all very touching," Phillips finally said, his tone dismissive. "But sentiment doesn't pay bills. Each of you is facing financial challenges that won't be solved by community goodwill." "That's where you're wrong," Catherine countered. "The Carter Foundation offers financial stability without sacrificing independence or community connection." She turned to the garage owners. "You built businesses that serve people first and profit second. That's not outdated, it's timeless, and it's worth preserving." Elena Martinez stepped forward, addressing her fellow garage owners. "My father always said that in the repair business, there are two approaches: fix it right or fix it fast. You can't always do both." She looked at Phillips. "I think it's clear which approach Precision favors." One by one, the garage owners voiced their support for the foundation's vision. No contracts were signed, the injunction prevented that, but public declarations were made. Local media captured it all, ensuring that any further legal maneuvers by Phillips and Victoria would face community scrutiny. As the crowd began to disperse, Phillips approached Mason, his expression tightly controlled. "Impressive theater, Carter, but this isn't over. The injunction still stands." "For now," Mason agreed. "But how long do you think it will last once a judge sees Catherine in person? Once the community knows what you're really trying to do?" Phillips glanced toward Victoria, who was engaged in a tense conversation with Walter across the room. "You're playing a dangerous game. Victoria Wells doesn't forgive opponents." "I'm not playing any game," Mason said. "I'm protecting something that matters." "Everyone has their price," Phillips insisted. "Name yours. A guaranteed position with Precision, double the salary Catherine offered, a college fund for your daughter. Whatever it takes." Mason studied Phillips, seeing clearly for the first time the emptiness behind the polished exterior. A man who believed everything and everyone could be bought because he had never valued anything that couldn't be. "There are some things money can't buy, Phillips. My father taught me that. It's a lesson you might want to consider." As Phillips departed, Catherine joined Mason, watching the Precision auto vehicles pull away from the curb. "Round one to us, I think," she said. "But Victoria won't give up easily." "What's our next move?" Mason asked. "We go directly to the source," Catherine replied. "The Reynolds Enterprises board meets tomorrow morning. It's time they understood exactly what Victoria has been doing in their name." The following day that brought another form of confrontation, this one in the hushed, wood-paneled boardroom of Reynolds Enterprises. Mason felt distinctly out of place in the borrowed suit, surrounded by executives whose collective net worth could probably buy half the county. Catherine sat at the head of the table, every inch the CEO despite the recent challenges to her authority. Walter flanked her on one side, Mason on the other, with Abright and his legal team completing their flank. Across the table, Victoria Wells maintained her composure, though the tightness around her eyes betrayed her tension. Beside her sat Marcus Reynolds, Catherine's son, his expression carefully neutral as he observed the unfolding drama. "This emergency session of the board has been called to address recent actions by our Chief Operating Officer, Victoria Wells," Catherine began, her voice steady and authoritative. "Specifically, her unauthorized collaboration with Precision Auto to undermine Reynolds Enterprises' community investment initiatives, and her filing of a fraudulent court injunction questioning my competency." Victoria leaned forward. "With respect, Catherine, my actions were taken to protect this company from decisions that I and others believe are not in its best financial interest." "By conspiring with a competitor?" Walter challenged. By sharing confidential corporate information with James Phillips? I shared nothing that wasn't already public knowledge, Victoria insisted, and my relationship with Phillips was purely advisory. Abright cleared his throat. We have evidence suggesting otherwise. He distributed folders to each board member. Text messages, emails, and financial transfers between Ms. Wells and Mr. Phillips dating back 6 months, including strategy discussions regarding the acquisition of properties Reynolds Enterprises had expressed interest in. The board members began reviewing the documents, murmurs of concern spreading around the table. Victoria's composure slipped momentarily before she regained control. These were exploratory discussions about potential synergies, she said smoothly. Nothing improper occurred. What about the court injunction? Catherine asked. Filing false claims about my medical condition to block foundation activities? Was that also nothing improper? Victoria's gaze hardened. I filed what I genuinely believe to be true. Your episodes are increasingly frequent, Catherine. Your fixation on this foundation, on reliving some moment of charity from 30 years ago, it's not rational business thinking. Not all valuable decisions can be justified on a quarterly earnings call, Catherine countered, something my late husband understood very well. Marcus Reynolds, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. The board's concern, Mother, is not with charitable giving itself. Reynolds Enterprises has always maintained robust community investment. It's the scale and structure of this particular initiative that raises questions. My son is right, Catherine acknowledged, surprising Mason with her concession. The Carter Foundation represents a significant commitment, one that I perhaps should have discussed more thoroughly with this board before proceeding. She looked around the table. For that, I apologize. Victoria looked momentarily triumphant, but Catherine wasn't finished. However, that doesn't excuse Victoria's actions, using company resources to collaborate with a competitor, filing legal actions without board authorization, attempting to manipulate vulnerable business owners. These constitute clear violations of her fiduciary duty. The boardroom fell silent as the members considered the evidence before them. Mason watched the subtle shifting of alliances playing out in glances and postures. These were people accustomed to power plays and corporate maneuvering, yet even they seemed disturbed by the extent of Victoria's machinations. Finally, the senior board member, a distinguished gentleman in his 70s, addressed Catherine. What outcome are you seeking from this meeting? Catherine's response was measured. First, an immediate vote on Victoria's continued employment with Reynolds Enterprises. Second, a formal board endorsement of the Carter Foundation as a legitimate, independent initiative worthy of Reynolds' support. And third, a commitment to withdraw the injunction and cease all interference with the Foundation's activities. Victoria's laugh held a bitter edge. You're asking them to ratify your pet project and fire me for trying to protect the company's interests. I'm asking them to choose what kind of company Reynolds Enterprises will be moving forward, Catherine corrected. One that balances profit with purpose, or one that sacrifices community trust for short-term gains. The debate that followed was intense but civil, with board members questioning both Catherine and Victoria about their actions and motivations. Mason observed in silence, recognizing that this was Catherine's arena, a battlefield of boardroom politics where she had decades of experience. What surprised him most was Marcus Reynolds. Despite his initial skepticism, Catherine's son asked increasingly pointed questions of Victoria, particularly regarding her unauthorized communications with Phillips. There was something in his expression, disappointment perhaps, or a dawning recognition of betrayal, that suggested his allegiance was shifting. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, the board called for votes on Catherine's requests. The results were decisive. Victoria's termination was approved by a 2/3 majority. The injunction would be withdrawn by day's end. And while the board stopped short of a full endorsement of the Carter Foundation, they agreed to a 1-year pilot program with quarterly reviews. As the meeting adjourned, Victoria approached Mason, her professional mask finally cracking to reveal the anger beneath. Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Mr. Carter. Catherine won't be CEO forever, and foundations can be dismantled as easily as they're created. Is that a threat? Mason asked quietly. A prediction, Victoria replied. You're a small-town mechanic playing in a world you don't understand. Eventually, reality will catch up with you. Before Mason could respond, Marcus Reynolds joined them, his expression stern. That's enough, Victoria. Security will escort you to clear out your office. He turned to Mason. Mr. Carter, might I have a word in private? In a smaller conference room down the hall, Marcus studied Mason with undisguised curiosity. So you're the mechanic who's captured my mother's imagination. I'm just trying to preserve something worth saving, Mason replied. Yes, she mentioned that, your father's legacy. Marcus leaned against the table. I confess I was skeptical. It seemed like Mother was letting sentiment cloud her judgment. He paused. But after seeing Victoria's true colors, I'm re-examining a lot of assumptions, including about the foundation. Marcus nodded slowly. I still have questions about the business model, but I respect the vision, and I appreciate how much it means to my mother. It's more than just a memorial project, Mason said. It's about maintaining skilled trades, creating opportunities for young people who won't or can't pursue college, preserving community institutions. All worthy goals, Marcus agreed. Tell me, do you have a succession plan for the foundation's leadership? The question caught Mason off guard. We're just getting started. I haven't thought that far ahead. You should, Marcus advised. If this initiative is going to outlast both you and my mother, it needs structural stability, clear governance, leadership development, transparent metrics. He smiled slightly at Mason's expression. Sorry, corporate thinking is hard to switch off. Actually, those are good points, Mason admitted. I've been focused on saving the garages, not on long-term sustainability. That's where someone with my background could be useful, Marcus suggested. As a board member, perhaps, to help bridge the corporate and community aspects of the foundation. Mason studied Catherine's son with new interest. You want to be involved? I thought you opposed the whole idea. I opposed what I perceived as impulsive decision-making, Marcus clarified. The foundation itself has merit, and he hesitated. My mother isn't getting any younger. This project clearly matters to her. I'd like to understand why. As they rejoined Catherine and Walter in the main boardroom, Mason felt a shift in the foundation's trajectory. What had begun as a personal mission, honoring his father, preserving a way of life, was evolving into something more substantial. With Reynolds Enterprises' resources, Marcus's business acumen, and the community's support, the Carter Foundation could become a model for preserving skilled trades nationwide. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. The injunction was withdrawn, allowing formal partnerships with Elena Martinez, Malcolm Jackson, and the Kowalski brothers to proceed. Horizon Auto underwent renovations, emerging as the flagship Carter Foundation garage with updated equipment and a dedicated training area for apprentices. A month after the boardroom showdown, Mason stood in that training area, watching as 12 high school students, including 4 girls, learned the basics of engine diagnostics from Ray. The teenagers were engaged, asking questions, their hands already developing the confidence that came from understanding how things worked. They're catching on quick, Catherine observed, joining Mason by the doorway. Why? Especially that young woman in the red bandana. Mason smiled. That's Elena's daughter, Sophia. She's been helping at Martinez's since she was Lily's age. The next generation of skilled technicians, Catherine said with satisfaction. This is exactly what I hoped for. We're just getting started, Mason reminded her. 4 garages out of hundreds that need support. True, but momentum is building. Catherine handed him a folder. 3 more independent shops have reached out this week alone. Word is spreading. Mason flipped through the information. A family garage in the next county, a specialized diesel repair shop, a father-son operation focusing on classic car restoration. Each one represented not just a business, but a tradition of craftsmanship at risk of disappearing. We'll need to expand the team, Mason noted. I can't personally visit every potential partner. Already in progress, Catherine assured him. Walter's nephew has extensive experience in nonprofit management, and Marcus has identified several Reynolds executives nearing retirement who might prefer meaningful community work to traditional leisure. Speaking of Marcus, Mason said, he mentioned joining the foundation board. What do you think? Catherine's expression softened. I think my son is finally seeing beyond quarterly reports. It's a development I've waited years to witness. They walked together through the renovated garage where Derek and Pete were working side by side on a teacher's ancient Volvo. Frank moved between bays, clipboard in hand, growing into his role as operations manager with unexpected enthusiasm. The atmosphere had changed, still focused on quality work, but now infused with a sense of purpose that transcended individual repairs. Outside, Mason paused by the newly installed sign. Carter Foundation Community Garage, Horizon Auto. Beneath it, in smaller letters, quality service with dignity since 1980. What would your father think of all this? Catherine asked, following his gaze. Mason considered the question. He'd probably be embarrassed by the attention. Dad never wanted recognition. He just wanted to do good work and be left alone to do it. And yet his example inspired all of this, Catherine noted. Sometimes the quietest lives echo the loudest. That's what I want Lily to understand, Mason said, that you don't have to be famous or wealthy to leave something meaningful behind. You just have to care about doing things right. Catherine smiled. I think she already understands that better than most adults. As if summoned by her name, Lily came bounding across the parking lot, school backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Mrs. Wilson walked beside her, carrying what appeared to be Lily's engine model. Dad, Mrs. Reynolds, Lily called excitedly. I won! First place! Mason caught his daughter in a hug, lifting her off her feet. That's amazing, Lil. I knew you could do it. Mrs. Wilson approached more sedately, carefully holding the model engine that now sported a blue ribbon. The judges were extremely impressed, she reported, especially when Lily explained how a four-stroke engine works in terms of energy transfer and mechanical efficiency. Dad helped with the building part, Lily said, but I did all the explaining myself. And quite eloquently, Mrs. Wilson added, in fact, the principal wants Lily to present her project at the district STEM fair next month. Catherine bent slightly to meet Lily at eye level. Congratulations, Lily. You've earned that ribbon through hard work and understanding. Lily beamed. Will you come to the district fair too, Mrs. Reynolds? I'm going to add a section about how engines have evolved over time, and Dad said you remember when cars didn't even have computers in them. Catherine laughed. I'm not quite that ancient, but yes, I'd be honored to attend, as Mrs. Wilson departed and Lily ran inside to show Ray her award. Mason and Catherine remained by the entrance, watching the everyday operations of the garage, customers coming and going, mechanics solving problems, apprentices learning skills that would serve them for a lifetime. Sometimes I still can't believe all of this happened because of one broken-down station wagon, Mason said. I prefer to think it happened because of one mechanic who cared enough to help an old woman when others wouldn't, Catherine replied. Your father set something in motion 30 years ago that's only now coming to fruition. Like a very slow-burning engine, Mason suggested with a smile. Exactly like that, Catherine agreed, and now it's running beautifully. 1 year later, the community center auditorium was filled to capacity, folding chairs arranged in neat rows, a podium set up at the front beneath a banner reading, Carter Foundation First Anniversary Celebration. Representatives from all 12 partner garages mingled with local officials, business leaders, and community members. On a display table near the entrance, photographs told the story of the foundation's first year. Renovated facilities, training programs, community service projects. Central to the display was an enlarged photo of Michael Carter standing beside a young Catherine, the station wagon between them, both smiling at a camera held by Thomas Reynolds. Mason adjusted his tie, still an uncomfortable accessory despite a year of occasional formal events, and reviewed his notes one last time. Public speaking remained his least favorite part of his new role, but Catherine had insisted he deliver the keynote address himself. They need to hear from you, she'd said. Not from me, not from Marcus. You're the bridge between your father's world and what we're building now. In the front row, Lily sat between Ray and Elena Martinez, practically vibrating with excitement. At 11, she had appointed herself the foundation's unofficial ambassador, explaining its mission to anyone who would listen and several who wouldn't. Behind them, Frank, Derek, and Pete sat uncomfortably in rarely worn dress shirts, representing the original Horizon team. Catherine approached from the side of the stage, elegant in a simple blue dress, her silver hair arranged in its usual perfect chignon. At 69, she showed no signs of slowing down, though she had reduced her role at Reynolds Enterprises, gradually transferring more responsibility to Marcus while focusing on foundation development. Nervous? She asked, noting Mason's fidgeting with his note cards. Terrified, he admitted. I'm a mechanic, not a public speaker. You're both, Catherine corrected gently. And more besides. Just speak from the heart, Mason. Tell them why this matters. As Catherine took her seat and the room quieted, Mason approached the podium, looking out at the faces gathered to celebrate what they'd built together. He set his note cards aside, suddenly certain that prepared remarks wouldn't capture what needed to be said. A year ago, he began, I was underneath a Honda Civic, trying to coax a few more miles out of a suspension mount that had seen better days. I was a mechanic, nothing more, nothing less, doing work I believed in without thinking much about its larger meaning. He paused, his gaze finding Lily in the front row, her proud smile strengthening his resolve. Then Catherine Reynolds came into my life, disguised as an elderly woman with a station wagon on its last legs. She tested me, though I didn't know it at the time. Not just my mechanical skills, but my character. My willingness to help someone who couldn't offer much in return. Mason gestured toward the photo of his father. What I didn't know then was that 30 years earlier, my father had faced the same test. Michael Carter was the kind of mechanic who believed that how you treat people matters more than what you can get from them. He passed that belief on to me, not through lectures, but through example. As he continued, Mason shared stories from the Foundation's first year. The Vietnam veteran whose delivery van was kept running so his small business could survive. The single mother whose reliable transportation meant keeping her job and her independence. The high school students discovering skilled trades that offered alternatives to college debt. What we're doing isn't just about fixing cars, Mason explained. It's about maintaining connections between generations, between neighbors, between skills and those who need them. In a world that increasingly values convenience over craftsmanship and transactions over relationships, we're preserving something essential. He acknowledged each garage owner by name, recognizing their contributions and sacrifices. He thanked the Reynolds board for their support, Walter for his guidance, and the customers whose loyalty had sustained independent garages through difficult times. But most of all, Mason said, his voice softening, I want to thank two people without whom none of this would exist. He turned toward Catherine. Catherine Reynolds, who never forgot a simple act of kindness, and who had the vision to transform that memory into something that will outlast all of us. Catherine nodded slightly, her usual composure momentarily softened by emotion. And my father, Michael Carter, who isn't here to see what his example has created, but whose spirit is present in every repair we make, every apprentice we train, every community we serve. Mason's voice caught slightly. Dad used to say that a good mechanic fixes more than just the problem in front of him. He fixes the customer's ability to move forward. That's what the Carter Foundation is about, helping communities move forward by preserving the skills and values that built them in the first place. As Mason concluded his remarks, the audience rose in applause. Catherine joined him at the podium, followed by Marcus Reynolds, who unveiled architectural renderings for the Foundation's next phase, a dedicated training center that would serve all 12 partner garages and expand apprenticeship opportunities throughout the region. The formal program gave way to celebration, food, conversation, connections forming between garage owners who had once seen each other as competitors, but now recognized their common purpose. Mason moved through the crowd, still somewhat uncomfortable with his role as the Foundation's public face, but growing into it with each passing month. He found Lily at the display table, explaining the Foundation's apprenticeship program to an elderly couple with the confidence of someone who had designed it herself. And next year, she was saying, when I'm in middle school, I'm going to start a club for girls who want to learn about engines and mechanics. Is that so? The gentleman asked, clearly charmed. And will you be running the Foundation someday too? Lily considered this seriously. Maybe, or I might design engines instead. Dad says I should keep my options open. Mason smiled, resting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Sound advice from a wise man. The couple moved on, and Lily looked up at her father. You did good, Dad. Your speech made Mrs. Reynolds cry a little. Did it? Mason glanced across the room where Catherine was engaged in conversation with Elena Martinez. I didn't notice. Just a little, Lily assured him. The good kind of crying. As the evening wound down, Mason found himself alone in the auditorium's small side garden, taking a moment of quiet before helping with cleanup. The night air carried the first hint of autumn, a reminder that seasons changed, time passed, but some things endured. He felt rather than heard Catherine join him, her presence familiar after a year of close collaboration. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge above the city lights. Michael would be proud, Catherine said finally, not just of the foundation, but of you, the man you've become. Mason nodded, accepting the compliment with the grace he'd learned from her. I keep thinking about what happens next, how we ensure this outlasts us. That's already happening, Catherine observed. Marcus is fully committed now. The board sees the value, both tangible and intangible. The garage owners are invested in each other's success. And Lily wants to start a mechanics club for girls, Mason added with a smile. I heard. I've already ordered the tools. Catherine's expression grew thoughtful. You know, when Thomas died, I thought the most important thing I could do was preserve and expand his business legacy, build taller buildings, acquire more properties, increase shareholder value. Natural enough, Mason said. You wanted to honor what he built. Yes, but I misunderstood what truly mattered to him. Catherine turned to face Mason directly. It wasn't the buildings or the wealth. It was using those things to make a difference, to create opportunities, to strengthen communities, to recognize the dignity in ordinary lives well lived. Like my father's, Mason said quietly. Exactly like your father's. Catherine smiled. Thomas would have loved the Carter Foundation. He would have seen it as exactly the kind of legacy worth building. Inside, the celebration continued, voices and laughter spilling out into the night. 12 independent garages, dozens of skilled mechanics, hundreds of apprentices and customers and community members, all connected by a simple belief that some things were worth preserving, some values worth passing on. Mason thought of his father, the quiet man who had taught him to listen to engines, to respect tools, to value people for who they were rather than what they could offer. Michael Carter had never sought recognition or wealth or power. He had simply done good work, day after day, year after year, fixing what was broken and sending people safely on their way. And somehow that modest life had created ripples that continued to spread, touching more lives than Michael could ever have imagined. Not through grand gestures or public acclaim, but through the steady accumulation of small kindnesses, honest work, and quiet integrity. As Mason and Catherine rejoined the celebration, he caught sight of the enlarged photograph once more. His father and a younger Catherine connected by a broken-down station wagon in a moment of simple human kindness. The past and present overlapped, and in that overlap, Mason glimpsed the future, a legacy not of buildings or wealth, but of values that would continue long after all of them were gone. Some engines, it seemed, were built to run forever.